and everyone in attendance tonight. And we need a motion to go into open session. We have a motion in a second. Okay, let's all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. We need to vote. Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
All right, go ahead.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, now Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, first up, recognitions.
Good evening. The Wentzville School District Board would like to recognize Mason Neal and Ronan Towns from Timberland High School for being selected as semifinalists in the 67th Annual National Merit Scholarship Program. Congratulations. I'll tell you a little bit about them. Mason Neal has a weighted GPA of 4.28, is ranked 15th in his class at Timberland, and scored a 34 on the ACT. Neal has been a member of the Scholar Bowl for 4 years and is currently the varsity captain. He is a member of the National Honor Society and a former member of Missouri Youth in Government, Chess Club, and French Club. In college, Neal intends to major in actuarial science or mathematics. Ronan Towns has a weighted GPA of 4.25, is currently ranked 20th in his class at Timberland, and scored a 34 on the ACT. He participates in Varsity Scholar Bowl, Dungeons and Dragons Club, which he co-founded, and is the current president of the Chess Club. Towns plans to major in computer science during his collegiate studies. Congratulations.
Okay, if everyone would join me in saying the mission statement, learning today, leading tomorrow. Next up, public forum. We're going to start with Jen Olson.
Hello, my name is Jen Olson, and my son's a sophomore at Timberland. I'm also vice president of the St. Charles County Parents Association. Tonight, I would like to address my fellow parents and stakeholders. If you've had enough of the political agendas being pushed in the classroom, the draconian COVID mitigation strategies, or just the overall insanity that's taking place in our schools, please join us in our fight. You can find us online at sccparentsassociation.com and on Facebook. We're taking action to protect children's education experiences and American freedom in the classroom. The St. Charles County Parents Association provides the platform, the education, and the tools for parents to become the best advocates for their children and to hold our public schools and public officials accountable. Our goal is to ensure that students are the #1 priority when it comes to school governance and policy.
Ma'am, can I pause you for a second and ask you to address the board, please?
I can It's a public meeting, I can address everybody.
We would appreciate it if you would address the board, please.
Well, I've been addressing the board for months, and I don't feel like we're getting anywhere. So. Our goal is to ensure that students are the #1 priority when it comes to school governance and policy, and that education received in our public schools will align with the Missouri Constitution, which is to preserve the rights and liberties of the people. If you're unsure if you have a reason to fight, let me shed some light on a few things you may not be aware of. The school districts are receiving millions of dollars in federal COVID funding. All they need to do to continue receiving this money is to keep forcing our children to live as if they are a danger to each other and society. They do not have an incentive to get back to normal. They only have an incentive to keep COVID alive and well. As of October 14th, the case fatality rate for people ages 1 to 20 years old in the U.S. is 0.01%. People who have received the COVID jab spread and contract COVID at the same rate as people who have not received the jab. In September in the UK, 1,278 of the 1,500 COVID deaths were people who received the COVID jab. In Missouri alone, children are 167 times more likely to go missing than they are to die from COVID. Children in general are 60,000 times more likely to be sold into human trafficking than they are to die from COVID. According to the CDC, of the 73 million children in the United States, fewer than 620 have died from COVID. That equates to 0.0009%. What does all of this mean? It means that there's never been a pandemic for our children, not the healthy ones and not the medically challenged ones. We are no longer in a pandemic, and those who continue to push the narrative that we are lying to you or too lazy to fact check themselves. We are in an endemic. I want you to do your own research. Go look at the numbers for yourself. Don't read the mainstream media's interpretation of the data. Go straight to the source and look at the raw data. That's where you'll find the truth. We have to come together to end this insanity that's been forced on us and our children. Don't be afraid to change your mind and go against everything you've believed since the whole thing began. We will never turn you away or shame you. We'll wrap our arms around you and your children and stand beside you in this fight. Again, for more information or to get involved, join us at sccparentsassociation.com.
Next up, Amy Benninghoffen.
Good evening. I would actually like to talk to the board and to parents too, but I will face you this time. The thing I want to talk about is social emotional. We hear a lot about social and emotional health. And I am very concerned about that for my kids and for many other kids in this district. What I like to bring to your attention is I think that we're counteracting helping the children's social and emotional health by the mitigation strategies that we have in place. The quarantining, we're keeping kids from school. We're keeping kids from socializing with their friends over and over and over again, multiple times. And I just think if it ends up anything like last year, 98% of those kids who are quarantined, modified, or other are not even getting sick. So they have to miss out on their extracurricular activities, which could help them get a scholarship to college, which is once again helping their education, but it also is really hurting their social and emotional health. I work with kids every day, young children, and a lot of them attend Wentzville School District, and I hear things like, I just can't wear the mask. My own child is now quarantined, and she told me last night that she just can't do it. She cannot stand something to be over her nose for 8 hours a day. So I am allowing her to quarantine at home. I don't think that this should have to be a choice that my 9-year-old makes. This is ridiculous. 98% of these kids who are on modified or regular quarantine are not getting sick, and yet we continue to do this. So I ask you, is their social and emotional health really that important to you? We're spending tons of money on educating our teachers and these children on their social emotional health, but we're counteracting it by your actions. I don't understand it. And the thing I want to say to parents, let's set aside politics. There's pure evil on both sides of the aisle. This is a crisis that was created by people in power to gain money and more power over us because we let them. This is a hard truth to swallow. I didn't want to believe it for many years until COVID. I see it so clearly now. There is a reason God says money is the root of all evil. Follow the money. Don't take my word for it. Do your own homework. Why does education have the most lobbyists? I'll tell you. Because if they can brainwash our kids now, they can control them later. This is really what's happening. Why did the NEA give over $40 million to the Democratic Party in this last election?
Next up, Amber Crawford.
I asked the board to pause the timer because I'm going to read out loud some sexually explicit content that is from our school libraries. Please excuse the children because it is not appropriate for the children to hear this online or in person. Can you please pause the timer? Really? I asked Dr. Kang to remove 2 books from the WSD school libraries. He told Director Dale that he refused to recall the materials that are in paper bags. Eventually, Dale was able to convince him to pull those, and yet they're still in the digital version. I think the digital version is probably a lot easier to pull, but I checked an hour ago and they're still there. So I'm gonna read from The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison. And it's gonna be very hard for me to read, so. Again, it's pedophilia material and is in no way appropriate in a school library. He must enter her, lifting the hem of her nightgown only to her navel. She must rest his weight on his elbows when they make love. So, an old man to a 16-year-old girl. To avoid hurting her breasts. When she senses some spasm about to grip him, she will make rapid movements with her hips, press her fingernails into his back, suck in her breath, and pretend she is having an orgasm. She might wonder again for the next 100th time when it would be like to have that feeling when her husband's penis is inside her. Then he will lean his head down and bite my tits. I want him to put his hand between my legs. I want him to open them for me. I stretch my legs open, and he's on top of me. He would die rather than take his things out of me. I take my fingers out of his and put my hands on behind. When a violence born of total helplessness, he pulled her dress up, lowered his trousers and underwear. I said, get on with it. And it made good the N-word. Come on, cunt, faster. You ain't doing nothing for her. He almost wished he could do it, hard, long, and painfully. He hated her so much. A bolt of desire rained down his genitals and softened the lips of his anus. He wanted to fuck her tenderly, but the tenderness would not hold. The tightness of her vagina was more than he could bear.
Ma'am,
He
time's up.
who approved this book?
This is disgusting.
And it's not Paul immediately. I should call the police on you, all of you. He further limited his interest to little girls. They were unusually manageable. His sexuality was
Ma'am,
anything
time's
but
up.
lewd. His patronage of little girls smacked of innocence and was associated in his mind with cleanliness. And later, this same pedophile notes, I work on
Ma'am,
I
please,
work on
time's
through
up. I
the
don't want to
Lord.
have to have you
He
removed.
sometimes uses me to help people.
We got it.
You
Time's
got
up.
it.
Yes.
We want it removed from the school libraries. How hard is it?
Next up, JJ Sufco.
My name is JJ Sufco. The Wentzville School Board Regulations 2610 was modified on April 9th, which is related to behavioral expectation for students. Looking through all the prior agendas and following meetings, there's no mention for the reason or need to update this policy and regulation. The Assistant Superintendent is on record stating that all changes to board policies and regulations are brought to the board's attention for approval. You can reference the July workshop. School board, do you know what's the background along with the subsequent events as to why this was updated on a random Friday without your consent? Consent. Student discipline is on the agenda for tonight. I'd like to speak to a slide on your website labeled Student Misconduct and Disciplinary Consequences. I find it interesting that beginning in 2013, the WSD begins significantly trending down in this category. Coincidentally, that same year, the Wentzville School District hired a new superintendent. What I find to be statistically an anomaly in this data is that while student enrollment is increasing, student discipline numbers are declining rapidly. How'd you do that? We know how you did it. You accomplished this from the July workshop. The assistant superintendent and the superintendent are on record saying you were not recording events correctly or appropriately. You've created a toxic work environment for teachers and paras to report such incidents. You can say all day you're not retaliating against staff or it's not tolerated because of school policies. Fear related to being retaliated against is real and happens every day under the direction and supervision of this cabinet and administration. Each year, teachers are emailed a survey, which is supposedly anonymous, but it's sent to their email and asks questions like, what grade do you teach and how many years experience? Really? You can easily make that identifiable, which is a word you all love to throw around. Why would any employee be comfortable being honest when being forthright, you risk being retaliated against and have been? In my own children's school, I know of 2 occasions whereby 2 staff members were sent to the emergency room for injuries sustained by student violence. Recently, my daughter came home starving. We later found out that the cafeteria was evacuated for student violence. In the incidents involving bodily injuries to staff or my daughter in the proximity of being hit by a thrown chair, parents were never notified about the mental trauma their child witnessed or the assault upon a staff member they look up to and respect. Why don't you let parents know? Why is it a secret? Why is it a secret? It's because you are concerned about your optics. School board, please ask your employee why parents aren't notified when students are witness their teachers or students being assaulted at the elementary level. In closing, I'd like to thank the school board for the mask and monitor that they voted on last week. Thank you.
Next up, Christina McCormick.
My name's Christina McCormick, and I'm glad that you guys are all paying attention now. It's pretty sad that a grown woman has to read some explicit things from a book for people to pay attention. You can thank that group for bringing that to attention, which is not their job, okay? We have people in charge of curriculum. We have people in charge of what comes into our schools. Why is this not taken care of? Why is this something that we have to then look at and then come bring to you and stand in front of you and talk about this? Yeah, I could tell when she first started reading, half of you guys wouldn't even look at her. The other half ignored, and then when it got really vulgar, oh my gosh. And then when people started saying something, then you were paying attention. I'm glad you're paying attention. This is not okay. When girls and boys read, have access to this kind of stuff, it breeds things that we don't even want to talk about right now. We know that's true. I have 5 kids that I have pulled from this district, and I am thanking myself very much at this moment that if my kid was in the building and had access to that kind of material, I'd have lost it. I can tell you right now, I can only handle so much that goes on in my house, right? Everybody, you do what you can, but when your kids leave those doors and they're out in the real world, you can only do so much. But when I send them to your school or they send them to the school, we're expecting, that you guys are doing your due diligence. I don't know how many more books are like that. We're going to find out. We're going to look as much as we can. But there's a lot of this that I don't know if you guys haven't paid attention to before. I know that not every district apparently goes through every piece of curriculum, although the law says you should. So do we need more help? We've got a bunch of money from COVID, a whole bunch, and it goes to so many different things. It's public knowledge. We can look it up. I have several copies of that. I would appreciate that when people come and they talk about this stuff, please give them some respect. Look at them. These people aren't trying to. Yeah, they're angry. I'm angry. You should be angry, But this isn't going to get better if it's us against you. It's us against you. We just want some things to be held accountable for, just like you want us to be held accountable as well. So that's all I have to say. I'm pretty upset. I'm a little taken back by what I just heard. So that's it. This is ridiculous.
Next up, Myra Wolf.
Hi, everyone. I'm Myra Wolf. I live on Mule Creek Drive in Wentzville. I'll make this short and sweet. Well, at least short. I'm with Antifa and BLM. Nah, of course I'm not. I just figured if I were, I'd get a free pass on being a domestic terrorist. I could loot, pillage, actually commit acts of violence, and just be considered a protester. Apparently, words are far more dangerous and threatening. So much so that your big daddy, National School Boards Association, has asked the United States Attorney General to empower the FBI to stop us from exercising our inalienable rights of freedom to peaceably assemble and speak. Well, guess what? We are Americans, and you cannot scare us into silence. You will be reckoned with as we exercise our right to vote. No, that's not a threat. That's a promise. We will not stand by. We will not stand down. We will stand tall together.
Next up, Melissa Wolf.
I'm once again going to ask that the children leave the room. I'm going to finish off Amber's statement from the book that she was reading from earlier, The Bluest Eyes by Toni Morrison, because I think it's really important that you all hear this. This is still available to the kids. The next book I'm going to also read is also still available to the kids. This is actively in the libraries. The tightness of her vagina was more than he could bear. His soul seemed to slip down to his guts and fly out into her, and the gigantic thrust he made into her then provoked the only sound she made. Removing himself from her was so painful to him, he cut it short and snatched his genitals out of the dry harbor of her vagina. She appeared to have fainted. Page 174. He further limited his interest to little girls. This is an old man, by the way. They were usually manageable. His sexuality was anything but lewd. His patronage of little girls smacked of innocence and was associated in his mind with cleanliness. And later, this same pedophile notes, I work only through the Lord. He sometimes uses me to help people. Page 181, the little girls are the only things I'll miss. Do you know that when I touched their sturdy little tits and bit them just a little, I felt I was being friendly? If I'd been hurting them, would they have come back? They'd eat ice cream with their legs open while I played with them. It was like a party. Next book, Lawn Boy by Jonathan Evanson. Page 19, again, available digitally to our kids, even though the books have been pulled, it's still available. And what else is out there in the libraries that we don't know, that we haven't caught? This is trash, and it's disgusting for me to read, and these kids can read it. And the books were checked out, so they're reading it. Not that it really matters. In 4th grade at a church youth group meeting, out in the bushes, I touched Doug Gable's dick. Doug Gables is a grown-up. The person speaking is a little boy. And he touched mine. In fact, there was even some mouths involved. Page 91, what if I told you I touched another guy's dick? What if I told you I sucked it? I was 10 years old, but it's true. I put Doug Gable's dick in my mouth. I was 4th grade. It was no big deal. He sucked mine too. And you know what? It wasn't terrible. Page 174. He talked about all times at church, but never mentioned our penises or the fact that we had said 10 words to me after our little foray in the bushes. Not a single reference to holding or tugging or sucking dicks. All I could think about while he was chatting me up was this little salamander between my 4th grade fingers, rapidly engorged with blood. Page 230. She claimed it said, why don't you admit we suck each other's dicks? We shared a Hershey bar, but then you showed me your dick. The next thing I know, it's in my mouth. We just sucked each other's dicks, and you're pretending it didn't happen. How can this be allowed? It is criminal.
Your lack of immediate and apologetic response is unconscionable. What is wrong with you? You need to fire whoever. You need to be fired.
I'm gonna ask for a point of order. Next up, Marlene Sluicer.
That's tough to follow because I'm bringing the rainbows and sunshine. So my name is Marlene Slusser, and I live in Lake St. Louis, Missouri. I've had 4 kids in the Wentzville School District from kindergarten up through graduation. 2 of my kids have graduated a couple years ago, and last year I made the difficult decision to remove my youngest 2 and move to another district. This was a difficult decision at the time because they were a senior and a sophomore. Yet it was also a very easy decision because I had options to make it happen, and not everyone does. I pulled them because they were not receiving the education that they needed and frankly deserve from Wentzville School District. But that's not why I'm here tonight. And as I said, this is going to be a little tough, but I do believe in what I'm saying as a whole. Tonight I'm here is because I want to tell the new Board of Education that I notice the changes that you are making. Although slow, you are making changes and moving in the right direction. I see more discussions happening between everyone. You are talking, not always agreeing, often disagreeing, but that's okay. We've elected 7 individuals. We don't expect you to agree on everything. I read on social media postings and see how you are sometimes heroes and you are sometimes villains. But you are still making the decisions that are best for our students. Slow, but making them. We are happy that your decisions are being rooted in education, and that is all that we can ask for. I want to thank you for your time and your energy. I think your families also need to be thanked because you are taking work home, you are taking time away from your families. It takes a lot of work and the emotional toll of the negative media. I want to leave you with this proof. Because of your decision a couple weeks ago, 903 healthy quarantine children were able to receive an in-person education. Thank you very much. Keep up the great work and keep the education in public education.
Okay, that ends public forum. Next up, consent agenda. We need a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Ayes have it. Next up, superintendent report.
Yes, up first will be a district safety presentation led by Mr. Schulte. And Dr. Mueller.
Thank you very much. I've asked Dr. Mueller to assist me this evening as well, since she plays a big role in what we do in the Administrative Services Department. We'd like to start off by, once again, just appreciating everything you guys do for the district and providing the opportunity for us to come here this evening and provide you with some updates as far as what we have going on district-wide with some of the safety initiatives that we are currently in the process of putting together and implementing, and some that we've made significant improvements on. Hey, Brent, could you just hit the next slide for me? Thank you. Just as a reminder, this is directly related to our CSIP, which we've had discussions about over the last several weeks and months. And this is directly related to goal number 2. If you go to the next slide for me, please. And I've asked Dr. Mueller to go over the next set of slides because she has been responsible for much of what we will discuss here today related to the topics you see here, as well as we'll be able to discuss the implementation progress as it relates to some of these initiatives. Dr. Mueller?
Thank you, John, and good evening. Under the CSIP Goal 2, we are focused on the indicator, implement security upgrades as needed to protect all students and staff in order to provide a safe learning and working environment. So in 2021, the district implemented the safety committee to review the visitor management systems and selected the Raptor system. This school year, we have begun to install the hardware, and the technology department has been working hard on that before and after school hours. They hope to have that completed by the completion of the fall semester. In the spring semester, visitors will enter the building. Gotcha. Thank you. Visitors will enter the building and then check in through the Raptor system. So that will include a driver's license, which will be scanned through a reader, which will then prompt the employee to review the information on screen. With that, if the visitor is approved, then an ID badge will be printed, which will include their photo, name, building, location, and then the date. The building will also be able to run a report, a daily report that will include all of the visitors to the building. The district is also reviewing the door management system. They are currently in the process of narrowing that down to 2 vendors, and that will be completed or selected here within the next month or so. That hardware with the external doors will be installed in the 22-23 school year. Security camera upgrades have been completed by the technology department, and that includes exterior cameras as well as cameras for North Point High School. Our phone system was also improved this summer. We previously had to dial 9 to dial out of the district, and that was removed so we can call out directly. On all of our phones, we also have an all-call button, which also acts as an intercom system. With that, our phone cards for all of our phones were upgraded or updated rather, to include that new system with the phones, as well as SRO extensions, nurse extensions, the building address, name, and extension for the phone. Staff ID badges, as well as the school crisis plans, are updated annually by the buildings. Additional safety measures that the district has in place include the Blackboard alert system. The buildings, as well as the district, can use this to send out emails, calls, or SMS messages depending on the severity of the incident. Our schools also work with local law enforcement to perform random drug dog searches within the schools. We ask families and students that when they see something to say something, and with that, the WSD app includes a tip line, and those tips are then reported to the appropriate departments and buildings to initiate an investigation. The state of Missouri also has Courage to Report. Those reports are then sent to the appropriate offices and buildings. You'll see a picture here of the emergency one-touch button radios. That orange button allows the building to directly call 911, which will then dispatch the police department as well as the fire department directly to the building. And each radio is tied to the address of the school. We annually test those on the safety day, and that includes the Wentzville Police Department, Lake St. Louis, O'Fallon, and St. Charles County Police Departments and their dispatchers. As we grow and add new schools and add additions to buildings, we have to include tornado shelters. And so with that, John Blanton has initiated safe room operations plans, which have been completed for the 6 tornado shelters. And then our staff also participate in individual department and building trainings, and John will go more in depth in that later. This year we held our 2nd annual safety day, and that was held before the first day of school, where our staff trained our certified staff with intruder training. That included a presentation as well as 2 scenarios that were led by our trainers. Our nurses within the district also presented first aid to all of the staff. That same day, Transportation and Student Services held their meet and greet, which allows our drivers to meet the administrators, nurses, special education teachers, and just district staff to get to become acquainted and to share information about students. And then our staff also have time to be able to complete their staff annual trainings, which John will explain a little more in depth. Our staff intruder training is based on the 4E options by Tier 1 Tactical. In 2018, they trained 49 staff trainers, which provided a 3-year certification. This summer, that was followed up with another training with an additional 30 volunteer trainers, and they also recertified our original trainers. Tier 1 Tactical provided parent communication that answers some frequently asked questions. We combined that with some information with the Wentzville School District, and that has been sent out through the district e-newsletter as well as building newsletters. Each building is required to hold emergency drills, which include 6 fire drills, 2 earthquake, 2 tornado, 2 student intruder, and 2 staff-only intruder drills. And the first intruder drill staff training was completed on the safety day. And then I'll hand this back to John.
Thank you, Dr. Mueller. And so next up, we provided you with a list of some of the annual staff trainings that each year we have our staff go through each one of these trainings, and through the addition of the safety day, which took place before students arrived, it provided us time on that day to make sure that we had the active shooter, the intruder drill training take place for all of our employees, and then also provide time before the students arrive for staff to go through all of these individual trainings. So this is just a sampling of some of the overall trainings that the staff go through on a yearly basis for you. And then just a continuation of those trainings that are compiled and that each year we make sure that our staff are aware of. And this list encompasses all of the different departments throughout the district. And I know that I provided this in the board packet for your review. So if you have questions at the end, I'm happy to go over those as well, and we can speak to the individual trainings there. Departments also participate in departmental specific training. And so we've listed some of those here for you because each of our departments has a different function within our district. So you can see that depending on the function of of the employment, there's a different list that's specific to their job qualifications that each of those staff members will go through. And then lastly, we wanted to share some overall district discipline data with you. And this goes back from the 2011, 2012 school year. And you can kind of see the progression of where we've been at the high school, elementary, and middle school level. The most recent years, it's kind of misleading when you're looking at the information. Of course, last year we had all of the different types of learning that students participated in, and then in the year prior to that, 1920, we had COVID that started in March, and that's when students were sent home for the remainder of the year to learn at home. And so it's a little bit hard to look at the data and understand all of what is happening there. We also have the transition of our 6th grade students down to the elementary level for the 17-18 school year there as well. And then along the way, we've made changes to how we work with kids, and then also what would constitute as a disciplinary referral and what may not. A couple examples of that may be that when we first rolled out the one-to-one initiative with our Chromebooks, if a student didn't come prepared with their Chromebook charged and ready to go, that would result in a disciplinary referral, and we progressed past that. Another one may have been one of the more historic approaches to working with kids in PE. If they did not dress out for PE, they were written up, and as it stands now, we do not require students to dress out for PE. Another significant one would be related to cigarettes. And while we are happy to report that in the past 2 or 3 years, I think we've had one infraction related to an actual cigarette. So that's an incredible improvement. The amount of e-cigarettes has made a dramatic increase. So we've kind of substituted that out with our students, although we are seeing a substantial decrease in the amount of e-cigarette usage or vapes in our buildings since they first made their way on the market. So that's a look at the total discipline for the district. And again, I would caution you when you look at last year and even the 1920 discipline, because it should not be an accurate representation of what is going on there. And then the last slide has to do with safe school violations. And these are violations as determined by DESE. And so we report these each year as well. And you can kind of see where, again, last year and the year before, when we were at the beginning and in the middle of the pandemic, you can see where we were there. And then in the years prior to that, you can see. So that's more of a 10-year look at where we've trended with our discipline, both overall discipline as well as the safe schools violations as defined by DESE. And then we would like to circle back to the overall goal related to CSIP as it relates to maintaining a safe, caring, and inclusive school culture, and answer any questions that you may have regarding this presentation.
Any questions?
Yeah, Mr. Schulte, appreciate the presentation, Dr. Mueller as well. Just to kind of put in my own words, understanding how we can define success. Where are we at on the spectrum of discipline? Actions result from various things. You mentioned some of those things that even skew the data. But, in terms of what I'm trying to understand is we use a variety of tools. We use a number of resources to support a variety of kids and our staff. And what I'm trying to continue to understand is how can this board, this administration, define success in a way that we can demonstrate to our staff, to our students, to our parents, to the community, and make sure that we're being cognizant and showing progress if there's progress to be made against this CSIP goal, for the district. There's no question the pandemic has thrown a number of wrinkles into behavior and kids that were once virtual now back, or other reasons for there to be things that we talk about. I am one that's certainly supportive of how we come up with a solution, how we define success, and working, as a collaborative group to solve those things. I'm just trying to gauge, just from your words, how you see success, how you would define that, and how we can do that as a collective group. Sorry that was long-winded, but.
No, that's okay. That's okay. I would try not to be as long-winded in my response. So in general terms, when we're looking at our CSIP goals, I think it's important that we monitor progress on those individual action items within CSIP. And a lot of what we've discussed here would demonstrate that we're making progress towards those action steps. Everything we're doing with the Raptor system and the door entry systems all shows that we're making progress in those security action steps. When you're talking about the other overall indicators of success, whether it's training for staff or you're looking at student behaviors, I think you have to first understand what result you're looking for. And collectively, after you have decided or we have decided what result we're looking for, then you have to determine what action steps you put in place in order to achieve that result. I'm not one to look at the pandemic and use that as an excuse, because if it wasn't for the pandemic being here causing some of the issues that we're working through, it would be something else. And so when you're talking about supporting kids and meeting kids where they are, I think we need to look at and investigate what we can do to support the staff at all levels. We're not just talking about teachers, but we're talking about bus drivers, child nutrition, paras, IAs. What can we do to provide our staff with support they need to help kids be successful? When you look at the discipline data, and you're trying to determine how to move forward from the discipline data, from my perspective, you're already too late, because discipline, by the nature of it, is a reaction to a behavior that's already happened. And the goal is to proactively keep the behavior from happening. So my suggestion as far as how to look at this and determine whether or not we're making successful progress is not to necessarily look at one specific data item related to the number of referrals, because we don't want our district staff chasing a data point. We don't want them to look at it and say, okay, our building had 25 referrals last year. If we get down to 23, we've made a difference, because we can meet that, but that doesn't mean that we've actually supported the staff member and, more importantly, supported the student in making progress. So from my perspective, and I am becoming long-winded, is that we need to focus on those strategies that we have control over, and focus on putting those in place and giving staff the resources they need in order to be proactive, versus the end result just being that disciplinary entry as it relates to discipline. But the other ones are a lot easier to make progress on.
Vice President Bryce, if I may. Do we at all do any kind of surveys for individual buildings that the building administrators send out to staff to just kind of get maybe their feedback or idea about how they feel about if the strategies are helpful or working? And if we do that, who reviews those results? Is it just the building administrator? Does it come to central office? And then what do we do with those results?
Sure. Our staff engage in a variety of surveys for different reasons. We send out annual surveys to all of our employees regarding their location of employment. I know at the individual building level, they utilize surveys to determine whatever they're trying to correct. We've done a lot of research and work on belonging surveys that are incorporated into our school improvement plans, which are completed not just by staff, but also by students. You know, we need to know, do our students feel as though they belong and have a place at school? And that's the same for staff. You know, our staff members need to be able to feel as though not only they belong and they have a place, but also that they have what they need. It's one thing for us to stand here and admit that our students don't have what they need, but we also need to recognize that our staff don't always have what they need. And when we're talking about behavior, in general, when we think of behavior, we think of that explosive child. When I think of behavior, I always use the example of the student who sits in class and is non-responsive and is a low reader. That student has behavior, and the behavior is keeping them from learning and progressing. It's not outward and it's not disruptive, so it doesn't grab the attention. But we have an obligation to identify the behavior that's keeping them from learning and addressing it. So we very seldom do we have a problem with identifying what the issue is when it comes to reading, writing, or arithmetic. We identify it, and then we put interventions in place. Well, we have students that have behaviors that are not academic. They're social emotional. They're related to 504s, related to IEPs, they're related to home life, and it's our job to problem solve it and provide them with what they need and provide the staff with what they need to work with the kids. So the surveys are critical in identifying that, not just from the staff perspective, but also from the student perspective. So we do that at the individual building level. We have teams that do it at the middle school, departments that do it at the high school, and then we have administrators that send it out through their building. We do parent surveys as well. So there's a variety, and in general, when the need presents itself, that's something that we should always look at doing.
Just to follow up with a little bit of what you said, so when you talk about inward, an inward behavior challenge, what do we do as a district in examining and trying to figure out how an aggressive student might be impacting a student who is maybe not achieving to the full potential because of the aggressive student?
Sure, yep. And we take those types of situations to our student problem solving teams on a regular basis because when we have a situation where there's an impact in the classroom and we have a student whose behaviors are not just keeping themselves from learning, but they're also keeping other students from learning, it's the same situation where we need to identify the current issue, and then we need to put strategies in place to remediate that situation. So if that student needs additional supports and they have a team of professionals that are working with them, then we have a process in place to get that team back together, look at the current status of the student, and make adjustments. And that team doesn't necessarily have to be a special education team or a 504 team. That could just be a team of caring adults in the school setting that routinely get together, know the student, can support the student, can support the family, and help problem solve that. But I agree, we have an equal responsibility to make sure that every student in the classroom, if there are barriers, that we're looking into how we can address those.
I'd like to ask a question. Obviously, you just mentioned the fact that with some of the support teams that you do engage then with the parents. Are the parents always included with all of the strategies that you may put together as a team? Are the parents always included in that?
Sure. Yes, anytime we have a study team that comes together, the normal practice, depending on the level of expertism that needs to be brought together, either the counselor or building administrator or case managers in contact with the parent. In most situations, especially if it's 504 or IEP related, the parent's a mandatory participant. They can give permission to go without them, but they're a mandatory participant. At the building level, some of the best allies we have are the parents. The parents can provide more insight into their child than what we can. We may be the educational experts, but when you're talking about, one of my two kids, I consider myself the residential expert, right? I'm the parent. I know what's going on. I know when they've had a good day or bad day. I know if they're going to see professionals outside of school. So we have to tap in on the parents to be part of that team. And that's when we make the most progress, is when we have collective unity between the school and the community. We may have all the professionals we can connect with our parents, whether it's Preferred Family or Kreider, Compass Health. We have those connections that the parents may not know about, but we need to rely on them to meet us and to work with us to make sure that whatever they share with us, we can use, and whatever we share with them, they can use and they can share with the people they're working with outside of school. You're welcome.
Any more questions?
Yeah. So John, just really quick. I think you've characterized, at least for me before, we've seen an increase in, outbursts or behavior issues, et cetera. And I don't think Wentzville's absolved from that, and other districts are probably facing the same thing. How can the board help us as a district and this cabinet administration be successful, and whether it's the strategies, whether it's staffing concerns? I know, for example, the SSIs that were approved certainly are meant to help with that process that you just described in terms of the teams, et cetera. Looking for this group to help, and it is maybe a collective question, what can we do to help? I think certainly as Secretary Schaefer has noted before, safety in our staff is of concern. It's used in negotiation discussions, et cetera. So I want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to support our staff, our students, et cetera. And I want to make sure that we have that right dialogue to make sure we're not missing something.
Sure, exactly. And I appreciate that. And, before I answer, I'd just like to recognize the fact that this Board of Education, whether it's the current board or recent past boards, you have approved more and have made it a possibility for us to reach these kids and work with these families more than I've seen in area school districts. Through the additional staff that you all have approved and the recommendations from administration that you all have approved as it relates to additional ESCs and SSI positions, counseling positions. Anytime that this administration has put together a recommendation and has put together an ask related to how we can better support kids, this board has been exceptional in taking that information in, asking a lot of questions, but ultimately moving that forward. So as far as what you can do, I think collectively we need to have the understanding that in order to meet our kids where they're at and help our staff, we have to have the same mindset. And from my perspective, that mindset is that by the time we get to that discipline referral, or by the time we're talking about suspending a kid, it's too late. We've missed the boat. We need to be proactive, and we need to investigate what needs to happen before we get to that point. And if we're not supporting kids, then the ask needs to be, what do we need to put in place to support kids? And if that's an ask of administration, then the task is we need to put together what our recommendation is and bring it to you as far as here's what we think can do that. Right now, we are absolutely hindered by the fact that we have these ESCs and SSI positions. We have full-time substitutes you all have approved. We have instructional assistants in the buildings you've approved. We've looked at how we provide ISS at our high school levels to support kids. You have approved all of that. And all of those gains we've made are hindered by the fact that we have anywhere from 5 to 15 unfilled positions on a daily basis. So all the gains we've made right now, what we're battling with is we are utilizing those staff members along with curriculum directors and coordinators and whoever else we can to keep our classrooms up and running. And so that's what's holding us back right now. We made significant gains and we will continue. And we as an administrative team have not been shy about coming to you with an ask. If we think that we have something that will help support our kids and help support our kids, we will continue to bring it to you. You're welcome.
Any more questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, professional learning program evaluation.
Happy to talk with you this evening about the professional learning program that took place last school year. Last school year, the professional development committee had 8 goals. We had the 8 goals for our program. We were able to meet all of those despite the challenges we faced with the pandemic. Our first goal was to provide focused learning that aligns with our CSIP. We continue to research and implement high-quality professional learning to best support instructional practices. That is, of course, to the best of our ability, and I'll be sharing later some of the limitations that we face in that area. Continue to learn and develop practical strategies for developing the whole child and the 8 characteristics of a WSD learner. That is what's in the portrait of a WSD learner. Continue to update and provide new teacher induction program that includes a mentoring program aligned to the DESE mentoring program standards and the beginning teacher assistance program in order to acclimate new teachers to the profession and to the WSD. Continue to provide time specifically for collaboration and professional learning embedded in the school year. Encourage alternative methods to engage in professional learning. And finally, to provide opportunities for administrators to engage in professional learning. So last year was a little different for us in professional learning. We had several limitations. I'm going to talk a little bit about the impacts that COVID had on professional learning in particular. However, there were some highlights and some things that we could still celebrate. So teachers participated in 4.5 days of embedded professional learning days. Those quickly shifted from focusing on instructional strategies related to new curriculum or to new programming or specific to content areas to how to teach in a virtual setting or how to make use of virtual tools that was very timely. So we were really appreciative of that opportunity. We had over 1,100 participants. Some of those might be doubled, but we had 1,100 participations in summer learning in 2020. That's extraordinary, given the fact that teachers left our physical presence in March of 2020, but still found time and energy to participate in those professional learning opportunities. And this is the first time we've had all virtual learning opportunities. We made a quick shift. So we had planned for some in-person learning, and that could not happen. So we quickly shifted all of our learning to virtual. During the school year last year, we had 80 third through 5th grade teachers participate in professional learning aligned to the new phonics program that we adopted for this school year. We had 133 teachers participate in after-school professional learning sessions specifically to support new teachers. So that new teacher program that was mentioned in our goals, typically we like to do a little opportunity to pull teachers out, have them see some model classrooms, model instruction happening. We were unable to do that, of course. However, those teachers still participated in the learning after school. And we are excited that we had 29 district administrators participate in the MLDS. That's the Missouri Leadership Development System. They provide professional learning for leaders. So we had impacts of the pandemic, of course. I've mentioned a couple, but first of all, Teaching and Learning Department was unable to provide support through professional learning during the school day. So throughout the school year, there will be opportunities for teachers to participate in things like called learning labs, where they will go in and they will watch instruction happening in a classroom, and they will sit outside the classroom and then debrief what they saw, aligned to our instructional expectations in the district. We were obviously unable to provide those kinds of opportunities last year. We did make the necessary shift to a variety of learning opportunities, such as asynchronous courses. So as we noticed that we were going to be unable to provide professional learning as normal, our professional learning leaders, typically our coaches and content leaders throughout the district, but also those who are within the schools, found ways to engage our teachers in the opportunity to learn at their own pace throughout the year. That was guided by either our coaches or our content leaders or our lead learners in our district. Unfortunately, educators were unable to attend conferences and workshops. Those were largely canceled. Some of them shifted to virtual, and when they did and the teachers still wanted to attend, we made sure that we allowed that to happen. However, most of them were just canceled. So that was very unfortunate. And also a shift we had to make last year was that we had to decrease the amount of our funding for district professional development. By law, we are required to provide 1% of our district budget to professional development. We had to reduce that in order to be able to make the spend the required 75% of those funds. So last year, the board approved that reduction. That was in place for 1 year only. So this year, for 2021, 2022, we are back to our full 1%. So we have fewer goals proposed for this coming year because we've met some of the goals that I shared with you previously. So things like the mentoring program and the new teacher program, those things are ongoing. We're doing them all the time. So to change or to add that here, we've already met that goal, so we're just going to keep doing that. So we put in place here some things that we really need to work on achieving as a district. So we will continue to provide focused professional learning that aligns with our district's CSIP and the current needs of district educators. So our CSIP, as you well know, was adopted in 2019, and never when we adopted that could we have foreseen that we would have had a pandemic that would have shut things down and required a shift in how students were learning. So we also want to make sure that we are responsive to teachers' needs as they arise, even if they are not particularly aligned to the CSIP. We want to continue to research personalized learning and investigate personalized learning opportunities for our educators. What we mean by that is that we have teachers who have been here for 20 years, 25 years, 30 years. They know a lot. They know more than our first and second year teachers coming in. So we want to be able to differentiate and provide personal learning opportunities for teachers in areas of interest. So we'll be researching ways that we can do that well. We will continue to explore and make use of alternative methods for engaging in professional learning. One of the things we've noticed as we have come out or for moving through this pandemic is that there are lots of alternative ways to reach students and also to reach teachers, to bring them into learning. So we're going to continue to research alternative methods for that as well. We will identify critical data to measure the effectiveness of our district professional learning opportunities. As we will talk about later, included in our individual school and our district professional development plan, we use Guskey's evaluation framework to measure the effectiveness of our professional development. We want to look and see what more data can we provide to the board and to our patrons so that they can see that the professional learning that we are doing is having an impact. And finally, we want to investigate opportunities to expand professional learning for our administrators. So we have administrators attending MLDS, as I mentioned, but often it's a struggle for them to find opportunities to participate in for their own professional learning. So we want to make sure that we can not only find those, but help them be able to attend those as often as possible. Do you have any questions?
Any questions?
Thank you very much for your explanation. I do want to ask, then you were just in the last sentence talking about the administrators being able to do this. So are we talking about, I know you've had opportunities to bring people in for your professional days, and that doesn't necessarily include the administrators at that point. So how can you help them with that limited time that they also have? I mean, are you doing more virtual or?
Right, so that's what we're going to be looking for. We'll be looking for what are the opportunities. So there are conferences, there are workshops that they could go to. We want to make sure that we are highlighting those for them so that they can attend those. But then also we're going to be looking, like I said earlier, in one of the goals about looking for alternative methods. What are some ways we can use alternative methods to bring some of that learning to administrators as well?
Could you explain what you mean by the word alternative methods? What are you specifically relating to?
Yes. So typically when we think of professional learning, we think of like the PD day, right? Where we have a day where teachers are spending their time learning. We have made, I would say, an alternative use of time would be we have summertime learning where our district lead learners, our coaches and our content leaders provide opportunities for teachers to come in and do some learning. But we haven't necessarily targeted our administrators for that learning. So that's something that we could do. We make use of, now we're really looking at how can we leverage after school time or before school time, because we can't use full days all the time to provide release time. So we're looking at those. As I mentioned, asynchronous, so sort of a learn as you go, like at your own pace. We have those. We've just started doing that for teachers. That's something we could also do for administrators. So typically our professional learning targets teachers that we develop here within the district. And we think we can find ways to expand that for administrators as well.
And do you do surveys?
Yes.
With
Yes. So our district, or our building PD staff and our district PD, they survey. They do a needs assessment to find out like where it is that teachers feel like they need to do some extra learning. In addition, we know where we are heading with instruction and instructional practices, and so we have a balance of these are the things that teachers know that they need, and here are things that we know that are coming that we need to provide them learning in. So we balance that. Other questions?
Vice President Bryce, if I may. So just reviewing the packet that you provided the board, where can we find the research that you guys have been doing from the past year? Where can the board review that?
So I'm reporting on a professional learning plan that was actually put in place by people who came before me. So I will have to research that for you, but I'm happy to get that for you.
Okay, and just a couple other follow-up questions. What factors determine the PD that we do in our district? What are some of the, like, 3 factors, the main factors that determine what we're doing?
So first and foremost is our CSIP, that guides most of our decisions. Again, we do a needs assessment of teachers. What is it that you feel like you need in order to be successful in your position? And then we know where education is going. We know what we are looking to implement. And we make sure that we're addressing what we think teachers will need to do that successfully. As well as, I mean, we also would consider, where are we with our student learning? So what is our data telling us? If we're seeing that there's a need to improve in our delivery of mini lessons or in how we confer. For example, we're doing a lot of professional learning on small group this year because we feel like that's an area of need for our teachers. So we are providing a lot of professional learning opportunities in that area.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Any more questions?
Vice President Bryce, if I may.
Yes.
Dr. Skeeters, what would you say as you think through 21 and 22 in this plan for these goals? What would you say the areas of focus on the PD should be given, what we know where we're at with our students, with our, culture, everything else that we're contemplating? What is it telling us thus far?
So the 2 big areas that we're focusing on this year, and there's multiple areas obviously, but the 2 big areas are small group instruction and engagement. So what we know, and what I think we're seeing as a result of what students have been through in the last, I would say, year and a half, is that we need to find ways to better engage them in the learning. Some of them have been away from us in person for a long time because they were virtual or whatever. So that's one. And then what we know is that as we are working through curriculum to best meet the needs of students, we look at how they are doing and we pull them into small groups and we teach to what they need. So small group instruction is the second big area that is in response to what I think what our students need at this point.
Okay, so maybe this question waits until the new business item, which I had pulled. But describe to me a little bit the process for because it looks like each building goes through and kind of assesses their needs, their culture, and I completely respect the needs to do that at the building level. Maybe just describe a little bit of that process overall and how that works, how this rolls then up to these goals, and then meets then at a macro level what we're trying to accomplish as you just described.
So this does get a little bit into that, but that's fine. We'll answer it now later. So the buildings do a needs assessment. Each building has a building professional development committee. That committee surveys their teachers. They take that information coupled with what else is happening. So for instance, as I mentioned, we purchased a new phonics program. We know that's happening. We know that the district has has indicated we need to take a strong look at small group instruction and focus on that. So I'm thinking from an elementary level, what they're doing is they're looking at what their teachers are saying they need through the needs assessment. They're looking at the fact that they have a new phonics program, that they have a new math program that they need some additional help with because the pandemic limited our ability to do that really well. And also they are looking at the fact that we are having a focus on small group instruction, and they're saying, okay, so we have all of these things. Let's take this information and let's work as a group to build a plan. Okay.
I have one more question.
Sure.
Just in reviewing the PD evaluation from last year, and I know you weren't in this role last year, but the goals from last year were pretty specific, and they spoke to percentages, attendance, just looking at it, APR scores, ELA, and math scores. So, and just looking at the goals in this presentation, they're very broad. Could you speak to why you chose to have very broad goals versus very specific goals from teaching and learning from last year?
So this is just professional learning. It's not the teaching and learning program evaluation. So the teaching and learning program evaluation will have those that are focused on student achievement. This is only about professional learning. So the goals from last year are those 8. And the reason there's a difference there is because teaching and learning, we focus on student achievement, right? That's what we're here for. And we address that as a district through the building school improvement process. The PD plan is aligned to those plans, those school improvement plans, to support that and support the buildings in achieving those goals. So we're really reporting on professional learning and the goals to grow that as a program, not so much on the impact on student achievement.
And you're correct in that statement. I guess I was just looking for, a comment from you about if you could speak to how the two go hand in hand and they align, a general statement, how they play off each other.
Right. So what we do is we look at, so as a teaching and learning department, which includes the professional learning, right, we look at where are our needs academically. So that's exactly why we chose small group instruction for an elementary focus and why we chose engagement for a secondary focus. And what I mean by that is secondary is obviously not as a second, but as a secondary level of focus. So that data helps us choose those areas of focus, which then drives the professional learning goals that we have. So we have multiple levels of goals also, right? So what you're going to be looking at later are our professional development plans for the school year. That includes our specific goals for this particular school year as far as like, what is the learning we're going to do? What will it accomplish? These goals are broader because we're looking to build that whole program. So how can we make professional learning better as a whole school district? Not necessarily what are the pieces we are focusing on this year to learn about, but really how can we make learning better? Am I answering that well? I'm not sure I am. We're trying to grow the program, so that's why we're looking at things like, do we have professional learning days embedded into our calendar? Are we providing time for collaboration? Are we ensuring that we are finding ways for both teachers and administrators to engage professional learning? Are we providing an opportunity, varied opportunities for teachers to participate in professional learning?
Any more questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Skeeters, and also to Directors Gaby and Frost for assisting with that. Up next will be our Human Resources Program evaluation. And just so the board knows, as I'm thinking of, and we're thinking about superintendent's reports, if not in the month of November, by December, we will be having a deep dive on the CSIP as a whole. So a bit of a teaser in terms of what's going to be coming in the future. So with that, Dr. Hector.
All right. Thank you very much. I love this time of year because I get to celebrate some things about the department. And tonight I have 3 of our members with us that I'd like to introduce. They all worked very hard on this data, and so I want to make sure that we recognize them for their hard work. Mrs. Pam Guidua, our Director of Human Resources. Mrs. Kim Garber, Human Resources Specialist. And Isabella Lansara, Human Resources Specialist. Okay. So with human resources, program evaluation, we pull from a lot of sources. So I wanted you to get a scope of how many data sources we pull from to give you the program evaluation and the data that we gave you. So we pull quantitative data from the programs listed there, but we also use qualitative data as well. And so, again, we don't have a dedicated HRIS system, so we use all of these different programs to come up with our data and our goals. So I'm going to review briefly our 2020-2021 department goals. Again, there's going to be some COVID talk in here, but I want to quickly try to get past that so that we can focus on what we're going to do going forward. One of our goals that aligns with our CSIP is assessing, modifying, and refining recruiting processes to increase the applicant pool, including a focus on diversity. We are revising that goal for 21-22. A focus on attracting, retaining, and developing high-quality staff. That's ongoing. Supporting employees through federal, state, and local mandates and guidance regarding COVID-19 for last year. That was met. And reducing student-to-staff ratios to reach the mean of the standard and desired staffing ratios that are published by the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. That's ongoing for elementary, met at middle school, and improving at the high school level. As you know, last year we had some curveballs thrown at us. A couple were budgetary, so we added a couple goals for ourselves around September, October, and that was to staff North Point High School under budget. We met that goal, and to utilize attrition and staffing strategies to support a salary and wage increase for our staff, and we also met that goal as well. I'm going to briefly, again, I'm not going to read all of this because I really want to get to the future, but in terms of recruiting, retention, and retaining and hiring, there have been many challenges. That is not a secret. That is nationwide. It's in all industries. The pandemic more adversely affected certain employees that caused them to separate. Many quit jobs or took leave of absence due to illness or fear of the pandemic or pandemic-related need. Employees and job categories that were more adversely affected are areas in which we're struggling now. We have a decrease in teacher candidates from universities, and fewer university students are choosing to enter the profession, and I'm going to show you some data on that in just a second. We actually have a significant number of instructional assistants who obtain teaching jobs. As it's probably not surprising to you, you see how many people need workers and how many positions are available to be staffed. So we all summer had IAs getting jobs, and so we had to keep posting those positions, and then we'd fill them, and then they would get a full-time teaching job, and we're very happy for them that was definitely an area that we saw over the summer that was a little bit of a revolving door. And then we had the government stimulus funding last year and the added unemployment, and that has made it difficult for all employers, public and private. A couple of areas of focus for this are turnover rate. So you can see our turnover rate in all categories of employees has increased. This is mirroring state and nationwide data. Prior to COVID, we had made improvements in this area. So we did see an increase in the turnover rates this past year. That is going to be a goal for the coming years, that we decrease those turnover rates. This is statewide data, and this data is important because the state talks to us a lot about this particular data. The fact that enrollment in educator programs is decreasing, so there are less people going into education. There are less higher education students completing the program to become an educator. Because of that, they have been predicting a teacher shortage for a very long time. It has been exacerbated and sped along because of COVID. And so I just wanted to show you some outside of the district data that mirrors some of what we may be seeing. This is additional data from the department, and this shows the retention rate of teachers after 3 years and 5 years. So an area that I really think we need to focus on in our district and in all job categories is retention. And that is because after 3 years, we're seeing people leave the profession very quickly. So after 3 years, you'll see in 2019 and 2020, we're only retaining as a state 64% of our teachers. After 5 years, we're only retaining 48%. So less than half are staying longer than 5 years in public education. This is a study that the department did with educators, just talking about COVID and the effect that that had on them. It talked about whether they're considering retiring, what their workload is, and how that has affected their enjoyment and satisfaction in their job. And then this is just to demonstrate again, this is from the Bureau of Labor Statistics from the Washington Post. This is just showing that from 2002 on, there are more Americans quitting their jobs at the highest rates on record. So one thing that the Human Resources Department processes employees from start to finish. So that is everything from once a building principal and a director makes a recommendation to our office, we are helping that employee with onboarding, we're helping them with paperwork, we're getting them through the fingerprinting process, all the way to the hire at the board level. And when we are turning those people right over, that is just putting a great deal of stress on everyone, and that's not a good practice. So we really need to focus on retention. For goal 3, again, I don't want to spend a whole great deal on COVID, but I did want to point out some of the things that our department did during this time, because again, all 7 members of the Human Resources Department worked very hard, as did everyone else, to meet employee needs during this time. So everyone in the HR department became contact trace certified with Johns Hopkins University. We adjusted procedures to align with the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. We provided COVID leave policy changes throughout the year to protect employees and help them through the changing guidance. The data point, the quantitative data point, is that we helped 1,844 employees from July 1st, 2020 through June 30th, 2021. 68.4% of our employees were affected by COVID. And that means that they needed some type of HR support or leave during that year. So that, and all 7 members of the HR department shifted major job responsibilities during that time. One of the pride points, something that was really good, and this is it is an effect of COVID. Hang on just a second, sorry. It's an effect of COVID, but one we couldn't predict. So, as you know, in 2020, we were anticipating growth in our student population, as we should, because prior to that year, we were growing anywhere from 350 to 500 kids a year. So we were anticipating growth. We also had gone to the voters for Prop C and Prop S. So we were staffing for those kids. We were staffing for that growth. What ended up happening, as we know, is that many people kept their kids home, especially kindergartners. Every district across the state and the nation saw a decrease in kindergarten students that year. We were 200, a little more than 200 shy of what we had anticipated and expected. What worked out for us, so we were slightly overstaffed, but what actually worked out for us is because of that, we were able to move 75 staff into virtual instruction, which we had to do to make the Virtual Learning Academy work. So because of that, we're still there are still some corrections happening. Because of that staffing and that lack of students coming, we did some things last year to self-correct, which is through attrition and through the early retirement incentive program. But you can see up here that our class sizes are good. Our class sizes are better than they've been in a long time. There are places where they are not, where we want them to be, but for the most part, these are better class sizes than we've seen in a long time. For middle school, so in your packet, I always list how many classes we have over 33 at the middle school and high school level. Sometimes that's unavoidable. So for example, we may have an English 4 class or an AP class that you have 33 kids that need that class. It's not enough to split it in 2. So sometimes we reach that threshold. But from last year, we have 0 middle school core classes that are at 33. They are in really good shape at the middle school level, and we have a 24% decrease in the number of high school classes that are at 33 students per class. I do not include the large classes like PE, choir, band, those types of things in these numbers. So the results of goals 5 and 6, these were the two goals that we added in the middle of the year because what we could see coming once the state withheld funding in May and June, what we realized is that we were going to be in danger of not being able to provide a salary increase for our staff, and that is not something that we wanted to do, especially since they're working so very hard. So we did a revision of our goals, and we created some strategies at that time to meet the budget crisis in an attempt to avoid any reduction in force. We didn't want to do that, and we wanted to provide a wage increase for our staff. So we were able to, through these strategies, staff North Point High School under budget. Now, when I say under budget, that doesn't mean understaffed. We didn't cut corners on the number of teachers that we needed. We did it under budget. And then we ensured that staffing was realigning with enrollment. So we offered an early separation incentive program, which was offered to staff in December. That helps us to know where the vacancies will be, because if we don't know those early, then we are hiring staff that we may not need to hire if we know those early. And we had an FTE savings of $2.7 million. So with that, that helped us when the governor released those funds. Combined with this amount of money, we were able to give salary and wage increases for our staff. So again, it's no secret that everyone is struggling for staff. And so we've come up with some very specific action steps and strategies that we've already started, but that we're going to continue to improve recruitment and retention in the district. One is to develop pipelines for directors and principals in hiring staff, increased presence at job fairs, improve our exit interview process and analyze data to respond to staff turnover. I shared with you in your packet, in the paragraph about the turnover rate, that one thing we saw in the last year is that 5% of our staff that we hire is staying less than a month. 15% is staying less than 6 months. So again, retention is the area that we need to look at. Part of that is, again, reading those exit interviews and having exit interviews as staff, but we're not happy with the tool that we have right now, so we're going to revise that. We need to continue to conduct compensation comparison studies and provide competitive compensation. And we feel like we need to do a better job highlighting our strong benefits package and pension system. And here's why. You can drive down the road and you can see signs that say $17, $18 an hour to work at any fast food restaurant right now. But what they don't offer, that we do offer, is a very healthy benefits package. Our benefits package for our employees is approximately $9,500, paid for by the district. And the pension systems available to support staff and certified staff are not available with many private sector jobs. I know that my husband's 401k is a good example. It rides with the stock market, and pension systems are much more stable. So we need to do a better job advertising those pieces. And then we also have been seeking alternative methods of advertising. So recently we did the Facebook sponsor where it boosts it and it sends it out. And we had 1,276 unique clicks. We actually had an on-the-spot job fair we had people there that we said, how did you find out about us? And they said, your Facebook ad. So that's something that we're going to continue. We're going to do state interviews with our current employees. And again, we're going to focus on soft skills with employees. So in here, here's just a couple on-the-spot job interviews. We have streamlined the interview process. We have made it so that people really don't even have to fill out applications without help right now. We will help them through the application process. We have on-the-spot job interviews where people just come in. We have our directors here, and they will interview them and then help them again through that application process. I want to point out the Drive the Bus event. First of all, this was a great event. This was a very creative strategy that was developed by one of our directors, and it was a really successful event. It was a 2-day event, and the reason why I'm pointing this out is because this is a good data point, again, to talk about this retention piece. So we had people come in, a couple board members did this. They came in and they drove the bus. They learned some great information. The presentations were really well done. We had 16 people attend. We offered to 10. We hired 7, and we only have 3 left. So retention, again, being the important point here. So our goal 2 is to transition 6th grade from elementary to middle school. This is a biggie. This is going to be a big move for everyone. So we've already started this process. We're actually almost halfway through this at this point. But we facilitated an advisory and steering committee. We met August 21st, September 7th, and September 21st. And the timeline that you requested, Director Goodson, are in these two slides. So we have already started to bring you some names for hire. We are in the process right now of moving 7th and 8th grade teachers, and we will release that 6th grade survey tomorrow. And then by December, we will have those completed, except for special areas, because special areas are dependent on student interest. So we have to wait for the students to express the interest in the courses that they want to take. And then the next piece is to staff the new middle school and add the grade level to North Point. So again, we just have lots of staffing movement going this year. So very similar. There's a timeline there for you. And so we next year, North Point will have 4 grade levels. Department Goal 4 is to begin implementation of the Teacher Recruitment and Retention Grant. So DESE has taken some of their ESSER money. So this is not our ESSER money. I want to make that very clear. This is not our ESSER funds. This is the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. They took $50 million of their funds and they created these grants. One is a Teacher Recruitment and Retention Grant. So, and the other is a Grow Your Own. So one thing that we're doing that I'm excited about is we're starting an aspiring teacher development program for our IAs and paraprofessionals who aspire to have career advancement. So right now we have 59 people interested in that, and we're going to start that. It's going to offer them an opportunity to have some more professional development and hopefully help them through the program of becoming a teacher so that they stay with us and they decide to become a teacher in the Wentzville School District. And then with the Grow Your Own, we're meeting with our pathways, and we have a committee going for that as well. I cannot stand up here and not say that we are hiring. So, so again, if anybody watching has any interest in joining the Wentzville School District, again, we offer amazing benefits. Working in the school is a very rewarding experience, and we would love to have you. So that is it. Thank you. Questions?
Any questions?
Vice President Bryce, if I may. So I like the approach in terms of all the things you're thinking about this year. There's certainly no question the challenges facing both public and private sector here in the job market. If you think about the turnover rates that are in here and the trends that we're seeing that are mirroring the state, as you think about the steps that you want to take this year to deal with retention, to hire more and have these events, et cetera, what's in your eyes, what is a good goal or a metric to see in terms of turnover rates, improvement, to see that those are working, not working, we need to do more? What in your eyes is a good way to measure that success?
So I think that we need to look at turnover rates more often. It is a challenge, honestly, for us because, again, we're pulling data from multiple systems. It's not an easy task. But we need to do that. I think that is a good step in the right direction if we pulled those more often per job category. And then we have started meeting more frequently with our department directors. That's information that we need to continue to communicate to them and help them strategize with us about what we can do to meet those needs. And some of that is we believe connecting new employees with a strong peer mentor. So one thing we were seeing on the exit interviews is people were leaving because they felt like they had the onboarding and then they got out into a building and they felt like they were a little bit lost at that point. And so they said that nobody came and talked to me, or I felt like I didn't have good idea of what I was doing. So one of the things we're talking with our department directors about and our building principals about is connecting. Teachers automatically get this because they get a mentor, but our support staff do not. So one of the strategies that we think we need to employ is connecting them with a strong peer mentor or making sure that the trainer can help them throughout the first several months so that we can retain them.
I have a question about, as I was looking at the entire presentation that you had put into our packet. And one of the questions that I have, and that is, you have, and I believe this is on page 1, and it says previous goals for 20 to 2020 to 2021. And the first item on there assesses, modifies, and refines recruiting processes to successfully increase diversity and inclusion in hiring. So I'd like to know, what do you mean and what did you mean by diversity?
So what we mean is having a variety of employees from different demographic, racial, ethnic backgrounds, because we want the kids learn best from people who they can relate to and who can relate to them. So one statistic, and if you'd have asked me the question, I can provide it to you though, but what we know is that a high percentage of teachers are women, of a certain age. And so what we really are trying to do is we're trying to attract more males into the profession. We want to have just inclusion of everyone, because we need that, especially the elementary levels. An elementary male candidate is very hard to find. So it's across the board. When I say diversity, I mean people who kids need to see and need to model after. So that's all diversity.
So do you find that looking through the prism of diversity that you have created the shortage perhaps of teachers?
No.
Because you're looking for A, B, C, D rather than the entire alphabet?
No, because increasing diversity, we don't look at, those aren't things that we look at when we look at an application. That's not on our application, so it's not something that we look at. So we pull in the best candidates based on their qualifications. We look at their experience, we look at their education. Those are the things that we look at. Certifications. So we don't exclude, and we haven't practiced that, we don't do that.
But according to what you had written here and what you have here, that a goal was to increase the diversity. And so at that point in time, again, would you not be limiting somewhat? You didn't have that many applicants to begin with, and you'd like to continue on with retention of people, but I wonder about that, because we're seeing that all around, quite honestly, and yet we are in the middle of not being able to have enough people to work because of some of the other economical situations that we have. So I'm just kind of wondering, if diversity doesn't actually add to less inclusion. And so you wrote on here that it was revised in the 21-22.
It's revised for all staff. So it's broadened.
So which item would that be?
It's
on?
number 1. It's right below that. Improve recruitment and retention of all staff.
So in other words, you're not now focused again on diversity and inclusion.
Correct.
You're not focusing on that as you did
right
last
now.
year.
We need staff.
That's correct.
Yes,
that's right. Okay, thank you.
Any more questions?
Vice President Bryce, just real quick, and Dr. Hector, I may ask a couple questions as we get to a further agenda item, but I hear a lot of things around substitute shortages. There's shortages across the board, so I'm not trying to single out one for sure, but that one seems to be a theme, and it has like a cascading impact to other staff and other positions, whether it's IAs, curriculum leads, et cetera. What specifically focusing on that need are we looking at doing? Are we considering other things? And just kind of help me fill in that.
I'm actually glad you asked about that, because I think this is a topic that we need to bring to light. So we have 517 active substitutes in our system right now. So we are hiring all the time for subs. That never stops. So we hire all the time for subs. It is constant. There's a person in my department who looks at those applications daily, and we bring people in and hire them to sub. what we did last year is we anticipated that this was going to be a problem. So we raised our substitute rates. I think it was last July. I believe it was last July because we felt like we needed to get ahead of our, sorry for our neighbors who are watching, but if we felt like we needed to be competitive. And so we also created 4 different layers and tiers of pay for our substitutes. So it used to be one flat rate and then one long-term rate. DESE, you may have heard on the news recently that DESE used to have you used to have 60 credit hours in order to get a substitute certificate. We had heard that they were going to waive that, so we included that on one of our tiers. They have waived it, but it was supposed to be effective in January. They want to make it effective now, so they have appealed for that to happen right now. What that would mean is that you no longer have to have any college credit hours. You have to participate in a 20-hour training with the department. I'm not saying that's a good thing. I don't know that we necessarily believe that that's a good thing, but it's a necessary thing. So again, what we are continuing to do is look at the compensation of our surrounding districts and make sure that if the timing is needed and we need to, we will bring a recommendation to you to take some action. Okay.
Any more questions?
Okay, and thank you, Dr. Hector. Our last superintendent's report will be a technology update. Dr. Skeeters, and specifically Greg Lawrence, will be leading this presentation.
Good evening. Thank you, Vice President Bryce, and thank you, Dr. Kane and the board for allowing me to speak this evening, share just a quick update regarding technology. As we begin this evening, I would like to just take an opportunity to share about our department. I work alongside 26 other individuals in our department who are very dedicated that work in our department to support our students to ensure that they have our students have a great learning experience when it comes to technology and systems that we have in place here. And as you know, over the course of the past couple of years, technology has definitely been a very important part of that as we navigated the past couple of years with online learning. And our team has worked very passionately and hard to ensure that our students have a great experience. Along with that, as we begin just sharing a little bit, we have kind of 3 guiding thoughts. The first one is technology is always evolving, and these thoughts really kind of guide as we move forward as a department to support our students. So technology is always evolving. An important thought to know, just because technology is moving, that means we're always adapting and changing to that technology as we move forward. As I think back 10 years ago, there was no iPad, there was no Chromebook, and now here we are 10 years later, and we have almost 15,000 Chromebooks in our district supporting student learning. So there's always that evolution that we see. Also, as we want to look in layers, so as we look at technology, we're always looking at additional layers to support learning, whether that's from computer systems to computers themselves, or just practices in place that we always want to develop in layers. And then the last part is we always want to make sure we're following federal guidelines, state guidelines, local guidelines, and following that compliance. But I think an important piece of that is just the trust part of that. We always want to ensure our students are safe and that we're being very mindful of our students and their learning. So as we continue, I'd like to talk just a quick moment about data and privacy, specifically with agreements and systems that we have in place. The first one is what is known as MOSPA, which is an acronym for Missouri Student Privacy Alliance. It's actually a national alliance that they have from area school districts and state school districts that work in cooperation with each other. So this is new to the state of Missouri. About a year and a half ago, this consortium of school districts started working together. And as a district, we are part of the leadership team of MOSPA, and we work with a couple other leadership districts in that role. And as part of that, one of the things that we are working on is that we're requiring systems that we utilize or services that our students utilize to sign what we call an NDPA, which stands for National Data Privacy Agreement. It's specific to the state of Missouri, and this data privacy agreement really speaks to how the vendors protect our students when they're using those services, which includes how they log in. It could include other state and federal guidelines, including there's a federal guideline called COPPA, and as part of COPPA, it speaks about advertisements to children under 13. So this data privacy agreement really speaks to that, ensuring that our students are safe and that their the vendor and services that we're working with are actually following those guidelines. So we are very excited about that partnership. What's also great about that is we work together as a state. We get to work with other districts grabbing and maintaining those data privacy agreements. To this date, the state of Missouri has 23 agreements, and we're continuing to grow with those agreements. The exciting part is the Wentzville School District is the originator of 20 of those. So 20 out of the 23, this district has been working hard to lead that as a state on there. We also use a system called ClassLink, which really helps in multiple ways for our students. This unified system for learning resources called ClassLink allows our students to log into one location and have access to all of our textbooks, digital textbooks, our learning management system like Canvas or Google Classroom, but it becomes one point of entry for our students into those applications. So from a student experience, it's a really great experience for them because they don't have to jump around to various locations. But then also on our end, it's a great way to ensure that it's only one location that our students have to navigate to. And also it becomes really kind of a nice part is they only have to remember one username and password, so they can just log into that system, and then the system in the background make sure they get in there appropriately. So additional pieces on here are network and computer systems and services. So we actually utilize a system, as you know, called Google Workspace for education. And as part of that, we have access to enhanced services that we utilize, which gives us a lot of additional features with our students. So that gives them the ability and our staff to ensure that they're safe and they have a good experience when utilizing those productivity services. Additional pieces that our students have access to, and staff has access to a password portal. They've always had access to this portal, so if they would like to change their password, they always have the ability to do that, and that's the same with our staff. It's just a great way for them to do that. Additionally to that, we also use content filter to help ensure that our students are safe with where they're going to websites and making sure those websites are safe and appropriate for school. So the content filter is an additional piece to that. So as we conclude this evening, continued work for the technology department. There's a couple things that we're continuing to do. The first one is a data governance committee. This is a committee that works to really kind of look at the what for the district. So what things do we need to look at? What areas do we need to focus on? And that allows the technology department or the departments associated with that really to ensure that that how gets done. So they really kind of focus on the what and allows them to really make sure that we can focus on getting those various pieces done. That committee is made up of parents, it's made up of administrators, it's also made up of community members and experts in the field of technology. Additionally, we're continuing to work with the MOSPA data privacy, student privacy agreements and an alliance. So we're continuing just to work with the vendors and the various services that we have just to continue to ensure that our students have a great experience online. We're also working with and partnering with other regional districts, and we see that through the Missouri Student Privacy Alliance and Consortium, and then just also working with other districts just to be aware of what they're doing and practices they're putting in place. And then the final thing is we're continuing to develop a technology program, and this is working with outside resources and using the expertise of those services to really help establish a safe environment for our students. So we're using the expertise of those communities to really, and those expertise to really ensure that our students are safe. So we're excited to continue that, see that continue to grow and develop, and provide a great learning experience for our students. So with that being said, those are just a few things that we're doing, but I would love to open that up for any questions.
Go ahead.
Any questions?
I do have one. So you had mentioned that you have a data filter, correct? So in other words, when a child, because I don't have children in the school district, so do all of the children now have Chromebooks?
So every student has a device in the district. That is correct.
Every student, not just if there's one per household. I
That
kind
is
of
correct.
remember that that's the way it went.
That is
Okay.
correct. Every student, yes.
So then, as we, for example, go to the store and we buy a laptop and it has all kinds of programs on it, are the programs that are there, would be like something that we would buy in a store? And or do you monitor exactly what programs can, and they have to access through Google, excuse me, let's say. So what are they able to do? A full range of everything that they would do on their own private?
No, so since it's a school device, we do focus certain applications for learning on there. So, for example, we use a system called Canvas, a learning management system, so our students have access to that system. Our students also have access to Google Drive and Google Classroom, which is our productivity suite. So there are certain applications that we make available for our students to use for their enhancement in learning for that. And that's one of the things that comes from that NDPA, that National Data Privacy Agreement, is that we work with other vendors to, if it's a resource that we're going to use in the district, that we're going to ensure that that NDPA is signed also as we work with those systems.
So they are a little bit limited then as far as accessibility to various programs. Is that correct?
So it's really kind of the focus of their learning. So if it's an educational resource, we'll want to make sure that they have access to that so they can use that for their learning.
So what I was asking was, if they sat down at the computer, like we have this one as well. I mean, I haven't really explored that on this one because I have my own at home. But the fact being is that can they access anything and everything that's out there on the Chromebooks?
They cannot access anything and everything, no. So that's where our content filter comes in to help ensure that that it is focused on there. Yeah. Thank you.
Can you speak a little bit on the students' passwords to their computer and what we're doing to protect the passwords?
So for that, students always have the ability to change their passwords. That's why we have the portal, password portal. So if there's ever a concern or if a family would like to change that, they can always work with our department, or they can go into the school and make that change. But the student always has the ability to make that change.
Okay, but they have to bring it up with the district and together the password will change, or can they do that on their own?
They can do it on their own.
Okay.
Absolutely. We always, like I said, we do offer, if they need assistance on there, we can help with that, but they do have the ability to make that change on their own.
Okay, thank you.
But it does have to be in district. So the device has to be on our district network, so it has to be in district to make the password change. So they can't change it from home. I think that might be what you were asking. Sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure. Greg, maybe you can speak to quickly. We approved in consent a Maryville University cyber security assessment, and I know there's some work to kind of further expand that. There's a limited scope with that. It's a free service that's being provided to the district, and I know we're looking at another service as well. Maybe just speak to kind of the scope there, what we're hoping to get out of both things.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a partnership that we are working to develop with Maryville and their Fusion Lab, and what they're doing is there's multiple services that can provide, but our hope is to utilize their services to continue to look at our the safety of our network and ensure things are set correctly and adjusted appropriately. So there's various levels, and what we're looking at is through that partnership that they can test various, and I would review various things with us. And you know, the great thing with that partnership is we can see that ongoing. So this isn't a one and done. This is what we expect to kind of be for multiple years here, really just to ensure that things are in place correctly, and through that review with them, they'll help support that. And that's just one piece. So kind of going back to those layers, that's just one piece of this. And as we continue to look at additional partnerships with other companies and places, we'll continue to see that develop out.
Any more questions?
Greg, will you just clarify, when you speak to one-to-one, for example, a first grader, that does not necessarily mean that a device is coming home.
That is correct.
On a daily basis with a first grader. You want to describe that?
Yeah, so this year, once again, we're excited to take that next step. So students K through 2 have an iPad in their access in their classroom. And that stays in that classroom for those students to use. Those do not come home unless there's a kind of an extended learning that needs to take place, but that device is there at school. That's the same for 3 through 5, 3rd through 5th grade. Let me be a little more specific on that. 3rd through 5th grade, they have access to a Chromebook, and that same thing, those devices are there in the classroom to support learning. When our students reach 6th grade, they actually are able to take that device home, and those students 6th through 12th grade have access to a Chromebook, and they're able to take that device to and from based on their learning that's taking place, and really kind of supports kind of their learning, the assignments that need to take place, whether at school or at home. So when we say one-to-one, we are saying that every student has a device, but their access to it, specifically K through 5, is at school. Those 6th through 12th do have the ability to take those devices home.
Vice President Bryce, if I may, can you briefly explain to the board and to the patrons or anyone watching what COPA is and how the district is compliant?
Yeah. So COPA stands for Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, which really is a federal guideline. And as part of that guideline, it talks about what websites can and cannot do related to students. And it's very specific to students under 13, and it's very specific to when students log, and I say students, but it's referencing children, when they log into a website. So when a student logs into a website, when they're under the age of 13, there's some things that have to be, that the website has to ensure that they're not doing. Some of those things include providing advertisements. They can't do direct advertisements. They cannot collect things that would ultimately identify in a way kind of that individual. So it's a very specific thing, but as part of that, we actually have a process that our teachers send a request on. If there's a website they're looking at that requires a student to log in, we look at what that website is, how it's being used, how it's being used in the classroom, and then we take that and we follow up through that NDPA process to ensure that it's being access, that they're following the federal guidelines for that. If the company declines signing that, we do end up blocking that website so they don't have access to that for learning.
I have one more. I have one more question. So if Maryville has the opportunity then to assist us in the cybersecurity, that would mean that they would have information into how to access our particular set of circumstances, correct? I mean, it's not like they're not going to be able to access anything. Correct?
So that gets a little. So our partnership with Maryville, and in particular, part of that agreement, there's what is known as an NDA, non-disclosure agreement. So as part of that, we are able to maintain the confidentiality of our network with their partnership, with their cyber fusion partnership that we're working with.
How would you know if they violated that?
So that would be part of our conversation with them, and we'd follow up in those practices, and that's where that agreement comes in place for that.
And you would be able to see activity on the internet? I mean, how would you know?
So that's kind of the partnership that we're working with on that. So that's why we're working with them in particular, to ensure that practices, pieces are put in place and the review with them. So that's why, you know, we've sought them out to work specifically with them on this.
And we have protections in place?
And that's
that, you know, I mean,
right.
I'm talking about accessibility that we would have full control over.
Right, and that's where that partnership comes in with Maryville.
But you're talking about a partnership, which would be a piece of paper that's signed. I guess what I'm saying is to you, how would you be able to absolutely and positively secure the security that we believe we currently have when you have accessibility from an outside? I mean, they're not part of Wentzville School District, they're part of an education system, but they're not part of our district. So how would you guarantee that we would have that security?
I think that comes back into, once again, that comes back into that partnership that we have. So as we're looking to expand this and as we look at other resources, that's why we established these, because we're working in conjunction to ensure, and that's their area of focus. That's why we're working with them in that. So we're doing this as a piece that we work together as a team to ensure that pieces are followed there.
Any more questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Moving on to old business. We need a motion to approve policy 0325, student representative to the Board of Education as presented.
Motion.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion?
Vice President Bryce, if I may. So I think I expressed some thoughts or points the last time we had this is the second reading. And so what I want to first understand, Dr. King, maybe this is a question for you. Presuming that this policy passes, what are the next steps in terms of timing of implementation? I know there's a regulation to still be drafted. So if passed, how do I think about the next steps there?
I think we need to have some understanding from the Board of Education as relates to expectation for this to be implemented. And in many ways, we could backdate or provide a backflow in terms of next steps as it relates to that. We clearly need to identify a process. If students were to be identified, what that process would be like, and when you would most ideally want to see this in fact happen, like be green lighted. So once we had that information, we would then begin to frame up process and subsequent steps.
May I add to that? Okay, so presuming it was passed, we would come back in terms of details, maybe even timing of execution of those details. You know, I just my view here is Board of Education meetings and topics and culture are at a very unique place right now. And so I'm being very cautious to think about approving student representation to be mixed into that culture. I 100% understand that the students are our customers, and we need to understand their perspectives on every decision that we make here. I am concerned of where we sit, you know, in terms of just not in Wentzville, but everywhere as it relates to board meetings, the topics, the concerns, the involvement of the community, et cetera, and putting kids, minors, into that environment, whether that is perceived or not, in terms of potential to sway a vote. I could imagine a topic such as masks, where if a student sways the vote or is at least perceived to sway a vote, that could be problematic. And really just thinking about the student in that case. And so this is a very unique time. I certainly respect where this was approved and kind of started back before maybe some of this was even a problem. And so I'm really struggling with the timing, maybe even the concept, at least as it's constructed under this environment. And I don't know if there's other ways of doing that, achieving, student voice, whether that be through the student councils and committees that board members can sit on, rotate, reports that can come to this board, et cetera, on topics that are relevant. I'm looking for the rest of my peers here to weigh in, but I think this is kind of an unspoken discussion at this point because it's been a challenge for us as even individuals and in this cabinet to participate in these meetings. And so I'm just looking for a discussion as a group.
I do have thoughts, but I do want to hear from the rest of the Board of Education.
I personally think right now is not a good time either, but I do want to see this policy reading move forward and be approved. So when the time is right later in the future, and who knows at what time that would be, that the ball has already been rolling and we can just go ahead and approve it without having to go back over and redo all the policy and start from scratch again. So it will be there ready for us when the time is right. So.
Vice President Bryce, I would like to say that this was something that was brought to us from students because students want to be involved. I think that squashing it and not doing it at all is not putting kids first. I think that pushing it off to the future is possibly a good idea with the current culture that we have on the board and in the community. But I don't think not doing it is an option.
I guess my position on this has been that we should make it available for, and I always thought that a spot, as we just have seen in the superintendent's report, would be a good opportunity for them to come to the school board and make their presentation. I do not want to wind address these young people by giving them a place on the board without a meeting, in a sense, that they have no vote. We have not established how this person is going to be elected or appointed by the schools. So to me, that's always kind of been my direction a little bit, is as a spot in the superintendent's report anytime that they feel that they have a topic of interest that they want to bring forward.
Vice President Bryce, I would like to reiterate what I've said in previous meetings. I have spoken with a student rep from a different state who talked about how great of an opportunity this was for her, and she was currently the student rep to the board, not on the board. It's completely separate. That's why it's a non-voting role. And I think that if the board is looking to not do this, they need to have some kind of open conversation with students so that students can come and speak about what they want to do. It was brought to us by students, and I don't think that it should just be decided that we're not going to do it because we think that we don't need to do it. I think the students need to have input on it.
Vice President Bryce. So my thoughts on this is I think we are thinking of all students when we think about all the different things that a representative to the Board of Education has to deal with and cope with. We have board members that sometimes want escorts to their cars. We have very serious situations. We have bullying in our schools that we all recognize. So I'm just wondering if that's going to elevate that and help it. I admire your efforts, Director Abbott, in trying to give students a bigger voice. In the short time that I've attended, or I'm sorry, been a Board of Education representative, a director, I have seen maybe a handful of students speak at public forum. I've also heard students tell me they don't feel comfortable at meetings. So that's where I am on this currently.
Vice President Bryce, I would like to say that students that don't feel comfortable at meetings have voiced that they don't feel comfortable at meetings because of what's being said in the meetings, so they leave the meetings or they watch them online. That's because of the behavior by board members and by the community.
But if I may, while that might be a reality, that may not change. So if they're choosing to leave, I don't know that I mean, yes, they could choose to exit if there is a board rep up here. They could choose to leave the meeting and not participate any longer. But I just, again, it's the environment, and I think we need to be cognizant of that. I think that's very important. I don't think this is the time. Dr. Kane, can you talk a little bit about the student advisory committees that we have and how maybe we can utilize those committees more as a board? Maybe you could bring some information, some insight to the board so we're more in tune with what students are thinking.
So I do have student advisory councils at every secondary building as well as Pierce Hall in the Wentzville School District. But that intent is very different. That's for me by design. That is for me to hear directly from students and to understand student voice. They are impacted by so many decisions that are made. As superintendent, I think it's important that I be able to hear exactly what students are thinking. And I'll be honest with you, it is always quite informative to hear their perspective. We simply see things differently, right? We just do. When that particular document on that wall, the Comprehensive School Improvement Plan, was designed, we had students that participated. I absolutely hear the board's questions and concerns as it relates to timing, but my take would be, let's move this forward at this particular point in time and figure out when is a more appropriate time to move this forward. So approving the policy does that so that we don't have to start, as Vice President Bryce is describing, we don't have to start from scratch. We know where we can start, where the board can start, and then move forward. The student advisory is a completely different context and a completely different meaning.
I hear you and I hear what you're saying. I guess to me this is an important role for our students to play. So I feel the most responsible thing to do would be wait on the policy as well. We don't know what's going to happen 6 months if the board wants to review this again in a year. Look at how much has changed in the 18 months we've been in. I think it would be prudent to wait on the policy and the regulation.
Vice President Bryce, I disagree with Director Stoley. I think that the policy has been written. It's been approved to move forward. This is the second reading of it. And as Vice President Bryce said, the regulation starts the work and it talks about the process, and it's going to take some time. If you're going to, as a majority of the board, squash this, I think you need to give students the opportunity to speak about it instead of just making the decision.
So I guess I would ask, if you're not on board with this second reading, is there a certain part of this second reading that you're not on board with as you were on board with the first reading?
Well, the first reading, there's not a vote. It's literally just what it is. It's a first reading by the previous board. There was guidance given by the previous board. At the last meeting, it was literally a reading. There was no opportunity for discussion in that meeting. We're having this discussion now. I stand my ground, and I just think it would be prudent. There's not one specific thing. Again, there's so much changing for our students. We just heard about student discipline. We heard about social and emotional concerns. We heard about staff not wanting to, just to retain staff. I just think that, yes, this is important. I think in our short-term priorities, for me, for what I believe is best in our students, this is not the time to move forward.
So would you move forward with it if there were some things changed in the second reading? Or would you have any ideas on what to change in the second reading that we could move forward with the policy if we took some things out? Maybe like Director Schaefer had mentioned, making a student representative report to the board and not sit here up on stage and be able to debate with us. I would just really hate to see this go away completely.
I respect your opinion, and I hear what you're saying. I mean, I hear what Director Schaefer is saying. I mean, I would be amenable to the rep providing, or the rep or reps, I think is it two? Director Abbott, can you correct me? Is it two? Two. Doing a presentation to the board. But I mean, to me, this is, again, just my perspective. I think two representing 17,300 students in the Wentzville School District, I don't know that that's the correct number. Maybe there should be a rep per feeder system. I'm throwing out ideas here.
Maybe there should be a committee, and then board members can be part of that. Kids can be part of it. That way, everybody's involved, not just the board making the decision yet again about the kids.
Could you please Director Abbott, could you please repeat yourself? I couldn't hear all of your statement.
There could be a committee, like there are a committee for other things, like construction, advisory committee for sixth grade movement. There could be a committee where other people can be involved, where it's not squashed. Again, kids believe that this is happening, and now you're saying that you don't want to do this. It sounds like as a majority of the board. So there are going to be people that have very strong opinions that are students that brought this originally. So I think that at some degree, you have to hear from the students before you decide to just not do it.
I have a question. So, is there going to be an age criteria in the student? The age criteria for the students, like
All of
seniors?
Right. All of that information would be developed in the regulation. The policy is just saying we're going to have it. The regulation has all of the stuff that goes underneath that. The interviewing process, if there's an interviewing process, how they're selected, ages, grades, all of that stuff. That's what's written in the regulation, which is yet to be happening because we're only looking at the policy.
Hey, I'm going to call point of order. We're trying to have a meeting. If you could quit yelling at us, we'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Director Abbott, if I may, and if I miss this information, I apologize in advance, but when you say students want this, what percentage of students are asking to be a part of this?
If one student asks, that's enough for me. We're supposed to be students first, and we're sitting here saying that we don't want students involved in a decision for something that they believe is happening. I think that's wrong.
I'm finished asking my questions and comments, just so you know. If you want to call in another board member to see if they have any feedback.
Does anyone else have any more comments?
If I could, President Bryce. I guess another one concern I have here, if we have a representative from one high school, how's that representation going to extend to the other three? And I believe we even included middle schools, or was talk about some middle schools being part of this too. So I guess my question, if we want to set up something in a superintendent's report on a rotating basis, then we would hear more from each. I'm just afraid we're going to be loaded with what's going to be presented is one student's viewpoint on the school that school of the school that they attend. So
The intent isn't to give a speech or to talk about a particular topic. It's to be part of the process. And again, I don't know if you would want to figure out if we could get written documentation from a student rep from different areas so that you can read and see what they have learned and experienced in the position. I really don't know what else to say other than we're supposed to be students first, and we're saying we're not students first because we have other priorities.
And these are things also that we can discuss after this is approved in regulation. We can break this down to the way the board would like to see this play out and make our adjustments as we see fit. I think right now we're just trying to approve this policy as it's written.
Vice President Bryce, if I may, Secretary Schaefer left, so this maybe was his question. What I'm hearing him describe is a report out, getting a voice, and then thus making sure that voice is across, middle schools and high schools. The way this policy reads, and maybe I'm not reading it the right way, but it appears as though if we approve this policy, what Director or Secretary Schaefer just described wouldn't be possible under the reg, meaning we're saying we're creating 2 board positions for 2 student reps, which I take as sitting, on the edge of this table and participating throughout the meeting, not necessarily a readout in the superintendent report. I'm not really saying I'm for it yet. So I brought the concern up from a timing perspective, but what I'm trying to understand is that though if we approve this policy as written, I wonder if that's hamstringing us at all, or if there is a revision to where, if, for example, making this up, if what Secretary Schaefer is describing he thinks should be, and thus the majority of the board thinks that, is this policy as written going to hinder our ability to make that change? I guess we can always revise a policy, I suppose, but that's where I'm a little stuck.
Those are different plans, right? In terms of a presentation during the superintendent's report is different than another table just to the left of Director Abbott, right? With students sitting and being a part of the conversation, listening to presentations, et cetera, et cetera. Obviously, they don't vote, but those are two different vehicles.
So maybe I'm listening to Director Abbott here. Maybe the compromise, because I don't. There's been good work here to put this forward, and I do want student voice the best way possible, and I do think their voice in terms of how they see this process, the best way to do that is makes sense. I think we lapped in terms of some, at least for me, when the original board, moved this forward to when I got elected. So there's some of me catching up to the thinking. I would be happy to, whether it's delay this to the next meeting to approve the policy and I should say, have a committee where we discuss this with the students. Because I don't know when the environment changes. I also want to get their input yesterday. So how do we figure that out as a collective group? I'm happy to sit on a committee and participate with students, the cabinet, fellow board members to figure that out, both on an interim basis and maybe a long-term basis. I'm afraid to approve this and not have those kind of dialogues so maybe that's the compromise here.
I'm personally good with a committee being formed to move this along, to get more opinions from the board and more ideas from the students on how we can better this and get it to where we all would like to see it.
Vice President Bryce, I think that it would be best to delay and move this so that President Bates can be part of the conversation as well and give her input. She has the most experience with Director Schaefer and Director Garber on committees being formed and all of that stuff, and working with Mr. Schulte as well. All I'm saying is that there's been work done. Students asked for it. Students think it's happening, and I don't think you should just not say you're going to do it. It's not kids first.
So you're asking to move this to our next meeting?
I'm fine with approving the policy as is because the regulation is going to have all of the specifics that everybody seems really concerned about. So it's not that piece of it. It's just the policy piece.
Would anything change in the wording of the policy? For example, Director Schaefer mentioned 4 people where we state here 2 students. So do you think that maybe we should go under some revision of the policy first? And then that way we can clarify the regulation.
I think the regulation and the conversation around the regulation, because there would be multiple people talking about it and looking at the information, and Mr. Schulte, you can tell me if I'm wrong, but the regulation piece is the piece that would eventually, if we were to make an amendment to policy, say maybe there are 4 people, maybe there are 2 people. The 2 people are what the research from the districts that have them have shown work best in districts of our size with our number of high schools. So, I mean, it can always be amended, Mr. Schulte.
So I've heard a couple of things here. The first one is there's some hesitancy to move it forward because of the current climate and situation that we have both with the board and community, which I understand. And so I would say that one recommendation would be that if you're planning to move this forward as it's written, that we do at least talk about a revision that would change it to the fact that the board will create to a board, the board may create, which will provide some flexibility for you all as a board to look at what timing would be most appropriate. And then also, this is a board policy that was written on behalf of the board and based on the work that the board had gone through. So this was per the direction of the board. And I know that Director Abbott brought these topics to the board for conversation throughout this process. With that being said, if there are revisions to the policy as it's here, you can certainly make those revisions now, or through the work developing the regulation, if that work would result in the need to revise the policy, we can bring revisions to the policy just like we do any other policy. So you guys mentioned talking with students and having board members on that. We also know that we will need to elicit the help of some of our high school teaching staff and get their information related to what classes or what groups of students may work with this as well. So that was all going to have to take place with the regulation as well. We have not started any work on the regulation because that would all be based on how the board wanted to see this roll out.
Can I ask? President Bryce, if I could. We vote on policies. Do we vote on regulations for approval?
Regulations for revisions go to you all through a different channel. With this one, I would suggest that specifically with this one, that you all would have conversation and you would have dialogue to make sure that everyone's comfortable with how it states. And then if you chose to take action on this specific one during a regular scheduled board meeting, I would say that would be appropriate.
So we could take action
Absolutely.
on the regulation.
Absolutely.
Vice President Bryce, I would also like to let board members know that maybe weren't on or didn't know of all the information that I did in calling school districts in other states and within our state and our St. Louis metropolitan area and looking at packets from board organizations in other states. It's all been provided to Mr. Schulte. So if you want to ask for that to review, you're welcome to do that.
Yeah, Director Abbott. I mean, they're attached in our questions, and I refreshed. I think I read those before when I first was on, and then read it this morning just to reemphasize. I think just for me personally, it's just that when we set this up and set this in motion, there were some different times. I made a statement publicly in the last 5 months that I've been on this board. Lots of things have changed, and not for the better, to be frank. And so I'm cautious of pigeonhole us into a solution and or a timing, and that's all I'm trying to bring up in terms of a concern and discuss the best steps next forward here.
Any more discussion? Okay, we have a motion and a second. We'll call for a vote. Catherine, can we do a roll call?
Director Garber? Director Stoley?
Nay.
Secretary Shaper? Director Goodson?
Nay.
Vice President Bryce?
Aye.
Director Abbott? Aye. No, we have 3-3. I move that we move the vote to the next meeting.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Move to the next meeting. All right. It will be moved to the next meeting. Next up, we need a motion to approve the budget adjustment as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion?
Yeah, just let me pull my questions up real quick. since I had this one pulled.
Yeah, you did.
We'll start the clock.
Do I have 3 minutes?
Yeah.
So Rick, I had sent some questions over, and I appreciate the responses. Maybe just for the crowd, the community, you know, we had an ESER survey, ESSER survey sent out in terms of what we think we want to spend money on. When we approved the budget, there was a breakdown, or assumed cost, as you will, for both Fund 2 and both Fund 3. This amendment to the budget is contemplating some spend and getting that in the exact budget, in the exact buckets. Speak to me a little bit about the survey. And maybe Dr. Kane, there's something for you to add to this as well in terms of timing of when we'll use those funds for what. How did we see those results, and where is that prioritization? I guess where I'm kind of getting at or drawing upon is, you know, there's probably revisions to this going forward as it relates to, we decide to use funds for this, we drop those into this budget and see revisions. So just trying to think ahead on how we're thinking about it, what my expectations could be for revisions going forward.
Yes, Director Goodson. Just to explain what a budget adjustment is. The budget adjustment is generally done for two reasons. The first would be that the money is budgeted in one location and wants to be spent in another. We have a very good control system in our district where money cannot be spent unless it's budgeted. That's a great control because as we set up the system, you have to have a purchase order to buy, and that purchase order won't go through our system unless it's budgeted. So therefore, excuse me, if someone, say at a school, wanted to spend money on pencils, I'm just throwing out examples, wanted to spend money on pencils, and the budget was in t-shirts, because of the system we have set up, nobody can spend more than is budgeted for a particular line item. So the majority of hundreds of line items here that you see are requests to move these budgets and transfer them between accounts so that they can be spent because of the control system that we have in place. So it's really a transfer from an account to account. It's not increasing or decreasing the budget in any way. The other reason we do budget adjustments is, for example, we get a grant that we previously did not have a grant for. We can't spend that money because there's no budget for it. So what we do as a budget adjustment, as we did for $181,000 here, is as those grants are approved, we increase the budget and the expense by the exact same amount. So we know we're getting the grant, or we received the grant, so we budget the revenue for that grant, and as we do that, we also budget the expense for the grant, and that enables us to put it in the budget, and therefore our system will allow that money to be spent, as our system does not allow those expenses to go over budget.
In terms of priority, what the survey showed was an interesting linkage, and we keep hearing and seeing repetitive themes: mental health, counseling services, and obviously concerns as it relates to the progress and matriculation of students. And so actually our budget reflects that, looking at hiring additional educational support counselors, interventionists in terms of reading and other coaches, and then some counseling services as well. So there's a nice dovetail there in terms of spending priorities and what the survey in fact told us.
Okay, just one more question then, and it was part of that first question. Listening to Dr. Hector talk about, you know, turnover and retention and concerns, we've got a number of, you know, items in here related to spend to consider some of those issues, whether it be a bonus, which we'll talk about, this contract here for cafeteria workers. Certainly there's overtime being spent as well on staff that we have. Just maybe speak just a little bit about how, as we make decisions on these extra things, how we think about that as it ties into the budget. You know, maybe there's room created because of the vacancy, you know, that we're seeing in unhired positions that would otherwise be there, and just a little bit about the process there.
Certainly, and you know, the question does come up, we have vacancies, so therefore we're not paying the employees that would have the vacancies. First of all, we do not budget vacancies, as I personally believe, and as this district has never done, that actually creates problems, in that you actually are enabling the budget, or hoping the budget comes into a number where it's not very conservative, and that's not a good way to go. But as far as attendance, yes, we will have extra dollars based on employees that we can't hire, and we budgeted those employees, so we have those dollars. Another thing that we have to realize is that all overtime approval comes through me. And what I do is I look at when I approve overtime, for example, we're short on people right now, and we do have that extra money, so it enables me to authorize overtime to spend against that extra vacancy dollars. The other thing is you'll see we have a contract coming up in just a little bit in new business where it asks for a third party to be used in place of those vacancies. And that also covers a lot of the vacancy money that we had and fills those in. I believe that it's too early in the year to make a determination of where we're going to be, and the fact that we do have more overtime than we've had in a long time, and also we're hiring third-party services to get employees that we don't normally have. And just to let you know, this is coming up under budget adjustment. Being over or under budget would not be a reason for our budget adjustment. Were the reasons for the budget adjustments for the items I previously described.
There are obvious fiscal considerations, but at the end of the day, in terms of us delivering the optimal, maximizing what we can offer to students in terms of staffing is definitely a consideration. And it also wears on the staff that are here, right? When we're having to constantly float, there's been discussion that's very obvious in terms of we have interventionists that aren't providing the interventions that they're looking and charged to do because they're trying to work to keep classrooms open. And so twofold, I understand the fiscal reality, but the real drive is making sure we can meet the needs of students, and then also working to not wear out the staff that we have as well.
Any more discussion? Okay. Moving on to.
You're going to want to take a vote there.
Oh, yeah. Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Ayes have it. Okay, moving on. We need a motion to approve the 2021-22 Wentzville School District Professional Learning Plan as presented.
Motion.
Second.
Dr. Skeeters, I asked many of my questions earlier, but just one. I certainly in my career, professional development, learning more, expanding your learning makes for certainly a better employee, but certainly also is a retention tool. It is a way to show that we are valuing, our staff and valuing, their growth as individuals, as educators, and the like. If I think about these goals heading into next year, how can I think about achieving that? I guess what I'm trying to say is, how do I delineate our personal development program compared to another district, to know it's succeeding, to know that we are putting that, because I do value it, and I see that in my own life, my own career, and I'm just trying to liken it. How do I know these goals are going to make us a leading district in this space, because I see it as a retention tool and something that we value, and I'm just trying to make sure our goals are aligned to that excellence, if you will.
So there's two things that play with what you're looking at here. So one is the district professional development plan overall, right? And then you have the individual school professional development plans. What I would say is, when you're looking at a comparison to another district, the PD we do here is based on the needs of our teachers and what they need to do their jobs to the best of their ability. In addition, right, we look to what are best practices or next practices that are coming down the line. So for instance, in the area of technology, since we've been talking about that a little bit this evening, our coaches are always learning. They're always out in front. They're always attending conferences to see what tools are out there, what's coming next. And then we bring that into the district. So that becomes part of the goals that we have. So it's a combination of that we want to make sure that our professional development plans, whether they're district or building, are meeting the right now needs of our teachers, and also that they are stretching to what comes next. So comparing to other districts becomes a little difficult because they're really it's more personalized.
Vice President Bryce, if I may. So I just had a question. Well, I guess it's more of an observation. Just in looking at the very lengthy and It was pretty comprehensive, so thank you for that. Various building, professional development. There were just, I mean, for me, I'm excited to learn what is a building doing, you know, to support staff, which will support our students. Some of the plans were really broad and vague, and some of them like were very specific. Like we're gonna do small group instruction for phonics, and we're gonna meet. And for me as a board member, and I think it would help the board as a whole to see more of that. So then that when you present a year from now, you know, you can directly say, at such and such a school, they did this. It was very helpful. We would like to, you know, further this and broaden it more for the district. So more an observation than a question.
Can I make a comment about that? Is that okay? So we would agree with you. We would like to have this. We were hoping that this year would provide us with an opportunity to work very closely. You know, we have 2 new directors, an elementary director and a secondary director, who are now charged with professional learning. We were hoping they could spend a lot of up close and personal time with our district professional development committee, given the challenges we are facing with the pandemic and the number of subs. We have had to scale back on that time. So now they are meeting after school. That happened last year as well. So the depth that they can go into is limited. Now, what I will say is that looking at the PD plans, looking at learning forward standards, and looking at, you see this in your packet, the Guskey's evaluation framework, that is something we've been working on for a few years now. So we were slightly interrupted, but we were hoping to get right back to that. So we're going to start back in on that this year. We're looking at the standards, we're looking back at this framework, and we'll be talking more about what does a quality professional learning plan include in it, being more specific, obviously being one of those things. So we are working on that goal. We agree with you.
Is it something that the individual buildings, I'm assuming they can revise as the year goes on? I mean, we're staying in the goals, but just as far as, you know, making them more specific, like dyslexia training or whatever it might be, can they revise that as the year progresses?
They certainly can, and they have the opportunity to add to it. So they have their the areas for progress, so they can indicate like what have we done. So if they've done things in addition to or more specific than that's listed there, they can note that there as well.
Any more questions? Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Ayes have it. Up next, LGC contract. Who? Sandy. Who pulled this from consent? Okay, Sandy.
So my concern about this is that obviously we are short-staffed.
Excuse me, Director Garber. I believe we need a motion in a second before we have discussion.
I'm sorry.
Okay, we need a motion to approve the LGC contract as proposed.
Motion.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, discussion.
There we go.
So I'll continue, and that is that what I noticed in this was obviously the people that were provided to do the work for us, as we have a shortage in our food service area. But what my big concern is that I didn't read anything in this particular contract about the fact that we would have people coming into our facilities. And I know that when parents and other people are included in the engagement with any of our children, they must have a background check. I didn't happen to see this in that. So whoever could clarify that?
I'd be happy to do so, Director Garber. We require a background check from any contracted employees. That's part of what we do. every single person we have a contract with, we do background checks. We participate in background checks with them.
So would that be, shouldn't that be in this agreement? Because these people are going to be providing us with the people. And they, the way I read it, they are not going to be responsible for quality of work or anything else. And it looked like to me that there was also kind of a guideline as to what their company would accept and what they wouldn't accept in terms of behavior. But that doesn't give us, I mean, obviously, if we are not happy with these people, you know, we could obviously, I would assume we can terminate them. Now, or we can, we wouldn't necessarily do that because we're not actually paying their salary and we're not paying any of their taxes or their workers' comp. We're not doing anything like that. But what if they decide, what if they were to say to us, I'm not gonna do a background check? So I think that, I mean, there might be some reason why people would be doing that. I can't think of exactly why they wouldn't, but I just think that it doesn't, we don't say anything in here at all about a background check. I know we're supposed to do that, and I know we're pretty regimented about that.
And we have.
But it's not in this.
Correct, and that's part of our standard process. We would not allow someone to come into our buildings and work with our staff or work with our students without conducting that background check. We would provide, or we would be provided with a list of employees so that we could do all of that background work before they would ever come on site. We have similar processes with other contracted agencies, and unfortunately, we do run into situations where anytime, you know, we may have an issue with an employee, and then we would contact the agency and tell them that they're no longer welcome on site, and that happens, and we have the flexibility to do that.
So when we do our background checks, they don't come onto our building and our premises until they have that done.
They would provide us a list of their employees ahead of time, and then we would facilitate that through the HR department, and then we would notify them of all of the staff that we were willing to accept.
And is this something that, because of the fact that they are not our employees, is this something that we pay for, or the potential employee of LGC pays for? Who pays for that background check?
And we are paying for the background check for these employees.
And how much are those? About $60, something like that, maybe?
Yeah, we were gonna say about 50, yeah.
Okay. So that was the concern that I had, and I didn't understand, you know, I mean, I didn't really connect the dots with
we are comfortable with
anything
this.
else with that.
Yes, we are comfortable with this. This falls in line with other agreements we have with third parties, and we do have the flexibility to select those employees that we choose to have, and we have the authority to require background checks, which we will. And if they're doing a good job for us, then we will welcome them and keep them on. And we also have the flexibility after, I believe, 420 hours to bring them on as a full-time employee if we choose. And at the same time, if they're not performing up to our standard, we have the capability of notifying them that their services are no longer needed.
Okay.
You're welcome.
Good, couple quick questions.
Yep.
The 420 hours, if it goes after 420 hours, we pay no fee to them. If it's under 420 hours, we pay $2,500 per person, I believe I read. But that's not my main concern. Some of these will be used as cashiers. Do we handle cash at our restaurants and our cafeterias?
Yes, we do.
And will these people be bonded?
I can't answer that. They would go through the same training protocols that we would take all of our employees through, and we would train them and provide them the same in-service and instruction that any of our cashiers would go through. Just because they're listed here as cashiers doesn't necessarily mean that that's how Gwen Doyle and her staff would utilize them. We asked for a service agreement that would address both the server, cashier, and cook. And because there's two separate salaries associated, hourly rates associated with those, they broke them out as such. But that doesn't mean that that's how we would use them.
Okay, let me restate that on that $2,500. It would be advantageous for them to work for us 420 hours before we hire them permanently. Would that be correct?
420 hours and 5 minutes, just to be safe. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Then that's no cost.
I believe those penalties are if we permanently hire them away from their third party.
Right.
Oh, yes.
Be like a finder's fee, yeah. So I have another question then relative to the cancellation fee that they have on here. So if you do not give 24 hours notice, I believe, if you don't give a 24-hour notice, then for however many that we employ, we are then obligated to pay each employee at least a minimum of 2 hours, correct?
For those employees that we would cancel, yes. So we are obligated 2 hours if we cancel within the 24 hours. And that's pretty standard with other partnerships that we have. We have similar systems set up with the transportation service that we have, that where if they are en route to pick up a child and then we cancel, we pay them for that route. Yes, so that is accurate information, and
But
we've
in our
agreed to that.
transportation department, those people work for us.
Not the
Right.
ones that where we utilize taxi service. So
Oh, I
yes,
see, okay.
yep. So
Okay.
this is in line with what the norm is.
So how do you think that that's going to work for us? I mean, you think that this is gonna be a little bit different? Generally, when you have a taxi service, you have somebody that calls at 8 o'clock that morning and said, my child's sick, so I don't need a cab today.
Right.
But,
Correct.
but
Now,
how would
with,
that work
with this?
this?
This will cover any time we may have a cancellation due to inclement weather, or say there's an individual building that has a pipe burst, and we have to make an emergency call to cancel just that location. If it's not within that specified time period, then we wouldn't be obligated to pay them for their entire shift, but we would be obligated to compensate them for the 2 hours. So I can't honestly see that happening very frequently. An inclement weather day would be the best possibility if they were supposed to come in and work the breakfast shift or the lunch shift, and but that's the way that it's written, and that's what we're comfortable with. Just another point of clarification, as we're talking about the cost here, we are looking at doing this as a cost-neutral option for child nutrition. So looking at the number of vacancies that we have, we've run an analysis of what that cost includes as it relates to salary and benefits, and we would only be looking to pick up a number of cashier or food service workers, cooks, servers that would make it cost neutral based on what we're not spending on the salaries and benefits. So even though we may have over 30 positions that are unfilled currently, we would only pick up between 15 and 20 employees, so that we don't go over our budgeted amount. You are welcome.
Any more questions? Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor? Say
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Naming of the new middle school. We need a motion to approve the naming of the new middle school as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion?
We actually have Dr. Mance, who will be serving as principal of this fourth middle school, and you want to speak to process and ultimately what's embedded in the memo, which is a recommendation.
Absolutely. First, I'd just like to take the opportunity for you approving me for that position. I am so excited. Had my first hard hat tour yesterday. I've been working with Dr. Hector to start the staffing. We're going to stay on timeline and under budget to make that happen. So I'm excited. I'm incredibly honored and privileged to be given the task of this new school, about the traditions that we're going to start, about the great educational experiences we're going to give for kids, and the welcoming that we're going to give to parents that are part of the program. And I'm really excited to be here tonight to discuss the naming with you. So the process that we did is we created a Google form. We gave that Google form to the 5th, 6th, and 7th grade students that are at Journey, at Wabash, and at Piney Ridge, and those are the students that will come in 6th and 7th grade. And then we worked with the transportation department to identify the 7th grade students that are at Wentzville Middle and at South Middle, and we gave the form to all of those students and then also to their parents. And the form was open from September 21st to October 2nd, and in that time it generated 142 responses. 31 of those responses were parent responses, and 111 of them were from students. And so there were some great creative names, but overall 73 of the responses asked for the school to be named the same thing. And so my recommendation to you tonight is to name it North Point Middle School.
Any discussion?
Only that my daughter is very disappointed her name wasn't on the short list. So,
Mine wasn't either, so
okay.
I don't know what to say about that.
So it's an even trade. Fair.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor for the new middle school to be named North Point Middle School, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Okay, ayes have it. Okay, moving on. We need a motion to approve the general obligation refunding bonds as presented.
Motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion?
Just a statement. Rick, appreciate the work on this, and happy to see us taking advantage of the current markets.
Thank you.
Any more discussion? Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Ayes have it. Next up, we need a motion to approve Frontier Middle School Change Order 4 as presented.
Mr. Blanton?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Ayes have it. Next up, we need a motion to approve the new middle school change order 12 as presented.
Motion.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Okay, no discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Ayes have it. Next up, we need a motion to approve Timberland High School Change Order 1 as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? Okay, we have a motion and a second. No discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Ayes have it. Next up, we need a motion to approve the North Point High School Change Order 36 as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Ayes have it. Okay, we need a motion to approve the staffing request as presented.
Motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion?
Dr. Hecker, just a real quick question. This is similar to what we did before in terms of accelerating roles. Knowing where we are with the health services department shortfall, is there other ways besides just this that we can support those needs? Or maybe there's things we're working on to help?
Dr. LeBrock can also help answer this question, but we have met several times with nurses and HSAs recently, and what we have told them is that we will be more than willing to bring additional positions to the board for recommendation if the candidate pool starts to come about. But right now we're having a problem getting candidates for the positions we have open, so there's it's not reasonable really to keep asking for positions when we can't fill the positions we have. But we're working with them, and we keep generating ideas. And if you want to add anything.
I think Dr. Hector mostly covered it. We are getting closer to filling the holes that we do have. We do have this North Point High School position on board, and this one that's attached to the middle school but doesn't directly just serve the middle school, ready to go in the event that we have all of our other positions filled and the data still shows that there is need. If we were to need to fill those positions as well, we would bring those to the board to expedite that process, and if there were additional need beyond that, we would absolutely discuss.
Thank you.
Any more discussion? Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Ayes have it. Next up, we need a motion to approve the attendance incentive as presented.
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion?
Vice President Bryce, if I may.
Yes.
So I am 100% supportive of ideas and ways to support our staff, given morale, shortness of staff, you name it, given last year, given where we're at this year. I'm not exactly sure this helps that. I look at other districts not putting an attendance component to that number, the number being potentially higher. And there, I don't want to try to solve things, but I think there's other ideas and areas that we could look at, whether it's purely giving a mental health day to the staff, finding a way to work that into the calendar. We talk specifically about sub shortages, but certainly looking at how we incentivize in terms of pay subs to participate and be more frequent participants in the classrooms. This almost seems to fly in the face of taking a break. And I think we can all admit taking a break in this environment is needed. And I don't pretend that I've done the math on 97%, but I'm going to guess it's not 4 days. Okay, so that's not a ton over a school year. And so I want to incentivize staff. I want to retain staff and find a way, whether that's if you're employed by the end of the school year, here's a number of retention, and finding other ways to support staff to keep them engaged, to keep them wanting to come in, and certainly take the time that they need, whether it's for their own sake or the kids being sick, whatever that is. Those are my general thoughts here. I'm not trying to say no to something we're trying to solve these issues with, generally speaking. I'm just not sure this hits the mark.
Can I explain the thinking behind it, please?
Sure.
Director Bryce? Okay.
Yes.
So there are several laws that we need to keep in mind when we're thinking about doing one of these things. One is certified teachers cannot get a bonus. That's against Missouri law. So our efforts to do something for our staff have to be tied to something that is earned in order to fund it in the middle of a year. So some of the things that you've heard other districts do are because they were doing that before the year. Our attempt at this was because, first of all, the staffing shortages hurt everyone. It hurts the people who are here because they're having to cover for the people who are not here. We also provided, and I would agree with you if this were a perfect attendance incentive, I would agree 100%. We're saying you can miss 4 days over 3 quarters. So that's a day a quarter plus 1. We're also not counting COVID leave. We're not counting FMLA, ADA. So we're really trying to make this our intention, whether it worked or not, whether our intention came across the right way or not, our intention was actually to try to get some kind of incentive to our employees and to get them some kind of fun, I don't know, something additional, right? To show from their hard work, because we are being adversely affected. The wording in this memo is very specific because we're also tied to the wording of ESSER, and ESSER does not allow for bonuses. So we designed this specifically to stay within the law and what we're allowed to do. The other thing that you mentioned that I want to actually make very clear is to create a substitute tier system, or to have substitutes all the time, and to incentivize subs to work. We also have to work around the Affordable Care Act, because the Affordable Care Act, if they work too much, then we have to provide them benefits. So understand that when we come up with a plan, it's designed the way it is because we are working around multiple laws and we're trying to make something fit within the parameters that we have. And so this is what we came up with. And if you, as a board, decide that this is not what you want to do, then we would welcome you to establish a goal for us. And then we could go back and look at the laws and the applicable laws and the funding and see what we could do. But this is what we brought to you tonight.
Yeah, that was going to be my follow-up statement, actually, Dr. Hector. If this is not the direction that the board wants to go, we recognize the problem. We were trying and working to be proactive. This is not meant to demean the work of people that are showing up every single day. We wanted to still provide some flexibility with the 4 days over the course of 3 quarters. But if the board is looking for something that looks different, we will go through a vetting process with some direction and move forward. But we were working to be proactive. Especially with, we're working to be proactive, and so if the board is looking for something else, we just need to know that.
Yeah, and I don't want to speak for the rest of the board, so I'm certainly want to encourage my fellow board members to speak here, but I am hopeful for something more robust, and maybe it is this, but we look at something district-wide that gives time away, a break. I mean, for example, Rittner just gave November 1st off for the entire district. Take a mental break, both students, parents, staff. I would be supportive of concepts like that. For example, maybe that fits in top of this. But I'm certainly looking for the rest of the board to weigh in here in terms of either direction, if this isn't it, or if this is it, so be it.
And I would agree with Director Goodson. I think a lot of the feedback we received on this was of that, and I think that I would like to explore other options on how we can reward our hardworking staff and teachers.
And President Bryce, if I could, please. My question kind of on a little different track here is that I think last meeting, or maybe the meeting before, we expanded 10 days for COVID. There's no doubt that we do not want to implement something here that tries to create attendance, but then bring somebody to our school that shouldn't be there and capable of performing their duties for the purpose of this attendance. So, thank you.
That's why we put the COVID leave exception in there, so that people would be able to still make it, even if they had COVID leave or had COVID.
I understand that, but I think we've provided opportunity for them to be compensated if it is a COVID related, and here we're additional compensation by taking that out. So, thank you.
Director Price. I'm sorry, Vice President Price. So I guess I have a question for you, Dr. Hector, and that is, I know that, we were not totally familiar with the guidelines for ESSER when it came to this. I know I was not. And so what I would like to see is perhaps conversation with the people, the teachers and those people that you are trying to benefit, so that they fully understand, you know, this whole thing as well as you've explained it this evening. Because I think that based on what we have been reading, I think that it didn't leave a good feeling with many people from the standpoint that they felt as though that they didn't matter. That's kind of what I got out of some of the things that I read. And I don't know that that's, I mean, I don't believe that that's true. I know that we do care about our teachers, and I know that they did a tremendous job during this COVID episode because, again, we were on very uncharted waters and such. But I think, you know, a survey, perhaps? I mean, could you do that and make us do a survey and kind of start off with, we can't do this and we can't do that because it's against the law? What would you like to see? You know, what would you feel comfortable with? I think that most people would feel comfortable with at least being considered, at least their thoughts to be considered.
So we met with employees about this so that we did get some feedback from employees. So we didn't just come up with this and then publish it. We talked with employees of all groups, not just teachers, but of all groups, so that we could get some feedback. And the feedback that we got was positive. So because we're trying to do something and this is something, right? This isn't penalizing people because it's something they wouldn't get if we didn't do it. So we're trying to make an effort to do something. We met with some employees. We did not survey the entire staff.
Is that possible to do?
I mean, we can survey the entire staff.
I think, to be frank, we didn't hear any negativity until late Tuesday-ish of this week. So, like any negativity. And so let me say this in terms of surveying staff. I think it's imperative. This is something that the board is ultimately going to be approving. What parameters would the board be supportive of? We can then frame some conversation and figure out how to gather feedback based off of that. But what I'd hate to do is to create something in the shape of a water bottle that the board is not okay with when the board's looking for this pencil, right? And so we need to make sure that there's some synergy and some consistency of thought and go from there. I don't want us redoubling or tripling our efforts, and I need to make sure that you all are okay with whatever is going to happen moving forward.
It's also, honestly, sometimes if you ask someone what they think and then you don't go in that direction, that's demoralizing as well. So I think it's important that if we're surveying our staff, that we're willing to take their feedback. So, and there will have to be parameters to that. I mean, this is we have 2,500 staff, and if we're talking about something monetary, that's a significant amount of money. So, again, we tried to do something for staff, and we hear your feedback, and we can go back to the drawing board and go from there. That's fine.
I'm just, reflecting the fact that there's possibly, while all intentions are good, and I see that, is there an unintended consequence here? And that's what I would like to know ahead of time before we approve such a thing. And I think that, generally when yes, I know, obviously we know we can't make everyone happy and we can't do everything that one person says, or even the majority, but it's always better to have, more ideas are better than just one. And I'm not saying that you only had one, but I'm saying that there was quite a bit of comment made about this that came actually to the board in email form to the board. And so, and again, I didn't understand. I mean, I'm not sure that you went into that detail in terms of what was legal and what wasn't. Did you do
I
that?
included the language exactly from ESER 2, and I did so on purpose. I did so purposefully.
So did I see it here?
It's the two bulleted items at the bottom, as well as the paragraph at the top speaks to exact language from ESER. One other thing that I think is important for the board to know, as well as the people who are watching, in addition to our staff. So early on in ESSER, districts were doing monetary items, I'll say, to staff members with nothing tied to it. The Department of Education has pushed back. So the ESSER 3 can't be used for this at all. And ESSER 2, they are being very, very strict with the application process at this point because this is money they don't intend for this use. I mean, they intend to help us through this staffing. They intend to help support staff through this time, but they are very strict with how we do this. So the wording in this was very specific. It was purposeful. And so whatever we do, we probably can't do what districts did at the beginning who used ESSER 1 in that way because the Department of Education and the federal government has pushed back, and they will probably not allow us to do that.
Vice President Bryce, if I may, at least from my perspective, not to speak for everyone, things to consider if the board does vote to push this out would be the percentage in terms of attendance. Frankly, the dollar amount. What I'm looking for is more incentive, more support, and then additional things like I described, that Rittner has done that we can do to support staff and kind of blanketly, because if you do things in isolation, maybe there's a combined thing that makes this all more palatable and considerate. And so that's how I'm thinking about it, and would explore that. So
I would agree with Director Goodson's direction.
Okay, any more discussion?
I like clarity. So are you saying, is the board saying a day? Is that something the board is interested in entertaining, or?
Can you clarify what you're saying? Are you saying a day off? Is that what you're asking?
I think that's what I'm hearing, but I want to make sure that's what I'm understanding. John, you had a comment?
Yes.
I do, if I may. If we're talking about any change to the academic calendar, we would need to fully vet that and make sure that we still have the attendance hours and everything else, just so we're clear.
And I completely want, so more parameters, nothing illegal.
That's always a good one. Yes.
Right, so we still make sure our attendance, our funding, and those things aren't interrupted. So give us some perspectives on what could be done with those additional parameters.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Nay?
Nay.
Nay. Nays have it. Motion did not pass. Okay. Next up, policy 4322.
Yes, this policy is being brought to you for the first reading. This is a mandatory policy versus we're due to new state mandates. So the mandates are listed there on the policy. We will bring it back to you next month for approval. And we will also be notifying staff of the change to the statutes tomorrow, I believe. We have a message going out to staff. So even though the policy won't come back until next month, to be compliant with the state statute, we will notify staff of this change tomorrow.
Okay, does anyone have any discussion?
Nope.
Vice President Bryce, if I may. So I don't have discussion to add on this particular agenda item, and I'm not trying to muddy the waters, but in reviewing Robert's Rules of Order, which is what we use for parliamentary procedure, it does say if there's a tie vote that the motion fails. And we had a tie vote earlier.
And then I made a motion.
Right.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure it was recorded as failing.
Yeah,
okay.
That was my view. We failed, and we just pushed.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure it was recorded as such. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, before we adjourn, is there anything any board member would like to see on the next meeting's agenda?
I don't have something specific offhand. I certainly will be giving that some thought leading up to the next meeting. But as I look at it, certainly what we just declined, I'd like to see be brought back to the board. And then there was one more thing, but that for sure needs to be brought back timely. Yes.
Okay.
Vice
Okay, we need a motion.
Excuse me, I have one more thing to say
Okay.
then. Okay, so I would like for us to have, hopefully we will have more definition to these things that are on and being shared with our students as far as the books that we have. And I'd like to see that on the agenda for next month. And that would be the list of the books that are not well. And I think another thing I'd like to see, quite truthfully, would be board policy or such that would now end this situation that we have, because this was a situation that presented itself way back in 2014, actually 2013, I think. But so I'd like to see this situation completely taken care of so that we're not back here again talking about books and videos and things like that that have illicit materials for our students. So I'd like to see that on the agenda next month. Thank you.
It's my understanding that we do have a committee looking at all these books and curriculum. Can you speak to that?
Per the policy, there's a challenge material process that's begun. There is a board of education representative on there, and we're following the steps of the challenged material policy and regulation are being followed at this point in time.
Okay, thank you.
Excuse me.
All right. We need a motion to adjourn open session.
Is there a time frame? I mean, I thought I read that there was a certain time frame of which the committee needed to act. And I think, are we beyond that time frame? No. Somehow I think we are. No?
There's a window for formation of the committee, and then there's a window for the committee to engage in its work.
Okay. Will we be able to have determination by next month? At
Actually,
the
it's
latest?
supposed to come back to the Board of Education, so the board will be naturally involved per the policy. It's policy and regulation itself.
Just really quick, Dr. King. So I was looking back at the board update on these. There was 5 books, I think, contested, and that may have changed since that date. 2 of the ones that were read were on that list. The statements made to us was that they were moved. There's obviously a belief that they're not. Because during that process, as described, they are to be removed while in the challenge mode.
That is correct.
So are the virtual books not removed? Is it just something you want to follow up and make sure? Like, I don't want to put you in the spot.
Not want to. We'll absolutely be following up on.
Because
yes.
that's what I think this board would expect, is that they're gone during this challenge period. I know maybe the physical books have been. They were checked out at some point. I know you were tracking those down. But
physical copy, virtual copy, digital copy. Yes. They should be.
I appreciate you taking care of that quickly.
Yes, thank you. Okay. Any more? Okay. We need a motion to adjourn open session.
Motion.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Ayes have it.
That's actually worse than how